Chapter 1068. Ming Huaping immediately revealed a hint of wariness. At the same time, she felt conflicted in her heart. The temptation of forming a grotto heaven was indeed great for her. She was dedicated to the Tao, or else she would not have stood out among the disciples and cultivated to this stage. But at the same time, she understood that Yuxiao school would not help her for no reason. It was very likely that she would have to pay an unimaginable price, and it might even harm Mount Li. But as much as she resisted it, she could not help but ask, "Junior, may I ask, what does Jinren want to do?" Zhou Ruing looked very calm and said, "I, Yuxiao, naturally will not do this without conditions. The great calamity is coming, and after helping you form a grotto heaven, I hope you can sit on the position of sect master and work for me, Yuxiao." Ming Huaping said in a low voice, "Master has said that eldest senior sister is the sect master." Zhou Ruing laughed and said, "When you become the sect master, you can still respect her as the previous sect master. That way, you will not be going against Jinren Yuling's orders." Ming Huaping lowered her head and said nothing. Zhou Ruing looked at her and said, "I can also explain to you that with your talent, it is not impossible to form a grotto heaven. I wonder if Jinren Yuling has told you in detail how to form a grotto heaven. With your lifespan, it is very unlikely that you will be able to form a middle method before the great calamity. But if you form a lower method, with the protection of my Yuxiao grotto heaven and the help of formations and pills, you may be able to reach this realm in 200 or 300 years. Ming Huaping's heart was moved. The sect had high hopes for her, and Jinren Yuling had naturally told her about the method. If the disciples of the 10 sects could reach a grotto heaven, most of them would form a middle method, and very few would form a lower method. If it was thousands of years ago, she would also try a middle method if she had a choice. If she chose a lower method, although it had nothing to do with battle prowess or lifespan, she would naturally be lower than her peers. But it was different now. The great calamity was coming, and if she did not have enough strength, it was hard to say if she could survive it. If she formed a grotto heaven earlier, she could plan and prepare earlier, and the chances of surviving the calamity would be much higher. However, she was hesitant. If she really agreed to fight for the position of sect leader, how would eldest senior sister view her? Although Zhou Ruing had clearly stated his intentions, she had a feeling that his intentions were far more than that. Zhou Ruing saw that she was hesitating, so he didn't force her. He cast a ray of light from his shadow doppelganger, which instantly condensed into a talisman and landed between the two of them. He said, "Martial niece, you don't have to rush to answer me. You can go back and think about it. If you have made a decision, you can use this talisman to find me." Ming Huaping hesitated for a moment, but still accepted it. She bowed and said, "If there is nothing else, this junior will take her leave." Zhou Ruing said, "All right, martial nephew shall go first. However, when the great tribulation comes, if you don't know how to grasp the opportunity, it will be snatched away by others." Ming Huaping's heart skipped a beat. Lowering her head, she withdrew. Not long after, a cool breeze blew in from outside the hall. The conjured body had returned. He merged with Zhou Ruing's split light shadow and revealed himself. She had a pleased expression on her face. If this plan succeeded, once Ming Huaping became a heavenly abode, she could use the momentum to return to the mountain and force Shen Zixin to abdicate. After she took control of the sect, Yuxiao would gain another ally. The reason why she did this was not because she truly wanted to support Lishan, but because of another goal. Ming Huaping's Tao companion, Zhou Junyi, could enter Lishan's sect with the full support of Yuxiao school and use its spirit cave to cultivate. If she could become a heavenly abode before the tribulation came, not only would the Zhou clan have one more spiritual master, they could avoid the 9 numbers, and they wouldn't take up the spiritual opportunity of Yuxiao. A clear light flashed outside the door, and Wu Yunbi walked in. He came closer and said, "Junior martial sister seems to be too impatient. Spiritual master Yuling has just left, and Ming Huaping is at the time when her feelings for the sect are the deepest. How can she easily agree to your proposal?" Zhou Ruing said indifferently, "It's fine. I just need to plant this thought in her heart today. As long as there is this shortcut, she won't be able to escape from my hands." Wu Yunbi said, "I see that Shen Zixin's talent is much higher than hers. This matter will be difficult, and the longer it drags on, the harder it will be. Zhou Ruing's expression had a hint of disdain as he said, Xin Zixin, this junior, is the new head of the sect, but her cultivation is shallow and her prestige is lacking. Just the mundane affairs of the sect will take up most of her energy, not to mention improving her cultivation. Wu Yunbi said, since the Celestial Palace's decision, in at least 200 to 300 years, there is no possibility of fighting with the Devil Sect, and Lishan's sect temporarily has no external enemies. I'm afraid there is nothing that can shake Xin Zixin's position as the head of the sect. Zhou Ruing snorted and said, even if there is no trouble, we can find some trouble for her. For example, the lower sects of Shiha sect, we can use them as knives. Wu Yunbi said in surprise, oh? Didn't Yuling Jinren destroy all the sects that used the name of the lower sects of Shiha sect? Zhou Ruing said indifferently, some escaped. Even if they didn't, we can find someone to impersonate them. In the past, they wouldn't dare, but now that Yuling Jinren has left, Lishan sect is very weak. We can give them a push from the back and encourage them to work for us. Wu Yunbi nodded and said, this is a method, but we need to be wary of Qinsong School interfering. I don't know what Yuling Jinren said to Qinsong School, but since she dared to leave, she must have left a backup plan. Zhou Ruing sneered and said, we are not going to destroy Lishan sect, we just want to change the leader. Even if she left a backup plan, she won't use it against her own disciples. Wu Yunbi said, then we will see how Ming Huaping chooses. Actually, he thought that if he could help Lishan sect obtain a grotto heaven and control it, it would be considered a success. As for Zhou Junyi being able to form a grotto heaven, he was not too optimistic. While his aptitude was all right, compared to his peers, he was obviously inferior. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been pushed out to form a marriage alliance with Lishan sect. He felt that it was better to focus on that treasured fetus. He had a feeling that this talisman was extraordinary. If it could be born, it would definitely be useful. After Yuling Jinren's ascension ceremony, all the Zenrens returned to their sections. Zhang Yan returned to Qinsong School as well. When he arrived at the Hall of Duzhen, he flipped through the letters on the table. There were no other matters these few days, but Li Xiaomi sent a message saying that South Sea's formation board had begun to be set up. The progress was smoother than expected, and after a few decades, they would be able to stand firm. Zhang Yan wrote a reply with some words of encouragement. With a flick of his finger, he sent it out. After his battle with Huang Yugong, he still had a lot of experience that needed to be verified. Therefore, after informing Jing Yu, he sealed the hall and went into seclusion to cultivate. A few days later, another letter came into the hall. Jing Yu took it and read it. It was sent by Jiang Zheng, saying that Yuan Zhangqing had successfully formed his core under his protection. His core had reached the 2nd grade, and he was wondering if he could come to the sect to pay his respects to his master. Jing Yu said, that should be the disciple that master took in Donglai continent. Unfortunately, master is in seclusion and should not be disturbed. I can't make a decision on this matter, so why don't we discuss it with Zhenren Fu? He used the formation door to leave the Xuanze ocean boundary and arrived at the outer hall. He walked to the front of a 10-feet-tall abode and bowed, is Zhenren Fu here? After a while, Fu Baoxing came out. He returned the greeting and said, so it's junior apprentice brother Jing. Why don't you come in and talk? Jing Yu said yes and followed him into the abode. Although the outside looked simple and crude, the inside was extremely spacious. However, the decorations were also simple. There was a stone couch with 2 praying mats and an incense burner. At the corner of the couch were neatly arranged bundles of jade scrolls. Other than these, there was nothing else. Fu Baoxing was once the head of a sect. At that time, he needed to be dignified when he went out. Whether it was his clothes or instruments, they were all exquisite. Now that he was an ascetic cultivator, he naturally did not need so many worldly possessions. After inviting Jing Yu to sit, he said, Junior apprentice brother Jing, do you have any instructions from master? Jing Yu did not beat around the bush and told him the reason for his visit. In the end, he said, I am just a servant after all. Master is in seclusion and I don't know when he will come out. Zhenren Fu and he are from the same sect, so I would like to ask Jinren Fu to make a decision for me. Fu Baoxing was surprised and said, "So honored master took in such a disciple. Since he came to Donghua, it is not good for him to wander outside. I can inform my 2 senior apprentice sisters and invite him to cultivate at Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake." Jingyu smiled and said, "That would be best. Then I will reply." Fu Baoxing nodded. Jingyu stood up and bowed, saying, "I will not disturb Jinren Fu's cultivation anymore. I will return to the palace now. Jinren Fu, please stay." Fu Baoxing did not keep him and said politely, "Junior apprentice brother Jing, take care." After sending Jingyu off, he tidied up his attire and left the floating celestial palace with a strong wind, heading towards Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. One day later, in the Pingyuan sect, Jiang Zheng received the letter from the floating celestial palace and called Yuan Zhangqing over. He said, "Junior apprentice brother, honored master is in seclusion and will not be able to visit you for the time being. 3rd senior apprentice sister and 4th senior apprentice sister are currently cultivating at Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake. Why don't you go there first? That is the cave abode that honored master used before entering Duzhen. It is also a blessed place. Cultivating there will not delay your cultivation." Yuan Zhangqing thought for a moment and said, "After I arrived at Donghua continent, I was busy looking for medicinal elixirs and did not have the time to visit my senior apprentice brothers and sisters. Now that I have the ability to protect myself, I want to visit them one by one first and then go to Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake." Jiang Zheng agreed and said, "That is what you should do." He took out a talisman from his sleeve and said, "I made this talisman for you. It can turn into a cloud raft and be used to travel with the wind. Under Yuaning, no one can hurt you." Yuan Zhangqing stood up and bowed deeply. He said, "Thank you for taking care of me, senior apprentice brother." Jiang Zheng immediately held him up and said, "Junior apprentice brother, there is no need to be so polite. Where do you want to go first?" Yuan Zhangqing pondered for a moment and said, "I will go to Blue Feather Pavilion to visit senior apprentice brother Han." Jiang Zheng smiled and said, "Junior apprentice brother Han is in Blue Feather Pavilion these few days. It is the best time for you to go now. If you are a few days later, you might be able to return to the floating celestial palace." Yuan Zhangqing thought for a moment and said, "Then I will pack up and leave." On the 2nd day, after saying goodbye to Jiang Zheng and Dan Huizhen, he left Pingyuan and went to Blue Feather Pavilion. This trip was smooth and he met Han Zhuqing. The latter knew that he had another junior apprentice brother and was very happy to see him. He immediately gave him a few spiritual birds. After staying in Blue Feather Pavilion for half a month, Yuan Zhangqing said goodbye and flew to Mount Qingtong where the Yaoyin clan was. However, he did not like demonic birds, so he still took the cloud raft that Jiang Zheng gave him. When he arrived at the boundary, he found out that Wei Zihong had already gone to clear Nether Heavenly Lake the day before, so he turned east. Along the way, he saw the mountains in the north that looked like dragons and snakes. He knew that if he went further, he would reach the North Darkness continent, the place where many demonic creatures resided. His eyes were cold and he thought, "If I succeed, I will definitely destroy this place and not let the demonic aura contaminate the human world." When he was 7 to 8 days away from the Great Lake of Dragon Abyss, he saw a big city in the sky. However, it was connected by hundreds of flying ships. It was obvious that there were many cultivators going in and out of the city. He thought to himself, "Could this be the flying ship celestial market? I have traveled here for 20 years and have only heard of it but never seen it. Since I have come across it, I might as well go up and take a look." Because the top 10 disciples of the Qinsong school took care of the small sects, there were many cultivators in the north and the Mystic Demon Clan and Mystic Demon Clan had stopped fighting. More than 10 sects worked together to set up a market and exchange the materials of their sections. Yuan Zhangqing thought about it and rode the cloud raft over. Not long after, he arrived on the celestial boat. Seeing that he was a core transformation cultivator, many cultivators gave way respectfully wherever he passed. However, after he walked around a few times, he found that many of the treasures here were not as good as the ones Jiang Zheng gave him. Moreover, most of them were used by junior disciples. Soon, he lost interest and left. However, he did not notice that at this moment, in a corner of the celestial boat, There was a young cultivator staring at his back and muttering to himself, "Why is he here? I didn't expect him to also enter the core transformation realm. I couldn't find you in the past. Now that I have come across you, I can take revenge for the past." He released a sparrowhawk and leaped onto its back. Then he chased after the place where Yuan Jianqing disappeared. In the Palace of Purity Truth, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged in the sky. After a while, he opened his eyes. Profound qi surged behind him and a five-colored light flashed. Then the profound qi surged and slowly changed. In the end, it turned into a big hand that covered the sky. With a turn of his magic power, the big hand suddenly pressed down. Before it reached the bottom of the sea, a vast and boundless vortex had already appeared. With a thought, a rumbling sound rang out, and the large hand suddenly scattered before gathering again. After a few times, it returned to the Xian Sea and disappeared. As his cultivation improved, many Taoist techniques and supernatural powers were unable to display their full power in fights of magical powers. This was because he was practicing the Taishan True technique that he had derived from himself, which was not compatible with many of the supernatural powers of the Qinsong school. Therefore, he decided to create a few more supernatural powers, and the big hand that was formed from Xian Qi in front of him was the Taishan Qi 5 Elements Big Hand, which was based on the mysterious yellow dragon capturing hand and the 5 Elements True technique. Not to mention the might of this technique, the way it was released and retracted was extremely easy. Moreover, it contained the changes of the 5 elements. It was just that this was the first time he had developed this technique, and he knew that there were still many shortcomings. In his mind, at least when his mana was used, this hand should be able to attack and grab magical treasures, and defend against supernatural powers and Taoist techniques. After thinking for a while, he held the broken jade in his hand and sank his consciousness into it again. R1152. Chapter 1069. After Fang Xin and left the sect, he was afraid that people he knew would come out to look for him, so he went north. Because this place was within the boundary of Qinsong school, Nanhua sect's influence couldn't reach here. There were hundreds of sects of various sizes, so as long as he didn't stand out too much, no one would be able to recognize him. After all, he was the disciple of Taoist Dong Tian. He had a lot of spirit shells, so he bought a pavilion in a flying boat celestial market and stayed there. These days, he tried to find out what happened in Nanhua sect and when Huang Yugong returned. However, because it happened not long ago, only a few people knew, so he couldn't find out anything. Fang Xin and saw that it wasn't appropriate to keep waiting like this, so he used a magic artifact to hire a core transformation cultivator to protect him and successfully condense the medicine into a core. These days, while consolidating his cultivation, he continued to ask for information, but he still didn't get any results. This couldn't be blamed on him. Huang Yugong was Taoist Dong Tian, so how could a disciple of a small sect find out about his life and death? Today, when he wanted to go out to find out, he accidentally bumped into Yuan Jianqing. He couldn't help but think about how he was defeated by Yuan Jianqing and had to use his treasured feather to escape. He was extremely indignant, so he chased after Yuan Jianqing to regain his face. After chasing for more than 100 miles, he found that there were always cultivators coming and going. He was afraid of exposing his identity, so he didn't dare to make a move. He just held a compass and followed from afar. For Chang, for Feng, for Wen, for Shui, WWT. This went on for 3 days, and he found that the others suddenly turned north and walked towards desolate places. At this time, he also reacted, and his heart jumped. He knew that he had been discovered. Because this place was close to North Darkness Continent, there weren't many sects, so it was a place where people rarely went. Thus, he didn't hide his tracks anymore. He chased after her openly. At this moment, Yuan Jianqing put away the cloud raft and stopped at a mountain. He sat down and adjusted his breathing. He didn't come here without a purpose. A few days ago, he found that someone was following him. Furthermore, this was a place where the earth veins were intertwined. The wind was fierce, and it could restrict the opponent's methods to the greatest extent. After waiting for more than an hour, a red-beaked eagle flew over from the horizon, and on its back stood a rather handsome young cultivator. Yuan Jingqing stood up from where he was and looked at the person who came over. When Fang Xin and was 1,000 feet away, he stopped with a mocking expression on his face. He looked around and said, "So this is the place you chose for your battle. It's a pity you don't know that I have many spiritual birds that can travel through different realms. Just like the one under my feet, when the wind blows, it can fly even faster." Yuan Jingqing flicked his sleeves. He took out the 6 divine shuttles and said, "If you're done speaking, I'll go to the heavenly palace." "Then do it, I still have to hurry on with my journey." Fang Xin and couldn't help but feel a burst of anger. He said, "You are really arrogant. Although you beat me last time, it might not be the case this time." Yuan Jingqing wasn't in the mood to talk to him and waved his hand. 6 flying shuttles shot over like arrows. When Fang Xin came out this time, he brought almost all the magic treasures and spiritual birds that Huang Yugong gave him with him, so he was full of confidence. He immediately took out a treasure bell. It released a misty green light and blocked the god-assaulting shuttles. Although Yuan Jingqing hadn't learned the lower half of the sensory nerves, he already had some sense of qi. He could tell that this light could only block physical objects, but it couldn't block ethereal qi and dharma power. He turned into a golden core, and a large ball of smoke rose behind him, pressing forward. Fang Xin snorted, and his hands clasped together, forming rays of pill aura that shot forward as well. He wanted to see who was better between the two of them. When cultivators reached core transformation realm, if they competed in pill aura, then it depended on which side's pill aura was stronger. His pill aura was grade 3, and although he hadn't reached grade 2, he believed that among those of the same generation he would rarely meet a worthy opponent. The 2 pill auras collided, and a dull sound rang out. However, what made Fang Xin incredulous was that his pill aura was actually scattered, and he was at a disadvantage. This meant that his pill aura was weaker than his opponent's. His thoughts turned quickly, and he thought to himself, if he isn't from a big sect, it's extremely difficult to cultivate to grade 2 pill aura. This person isn't a loose cultivator, and looking at the direction he's heading towards Qinsong. Could he be a disciple of Qinsong? Thinking about this, his whole body quivered, and his mind became much clearer. He hadn't solved his own problems, and if the other party was from Qinsong, he wouldn't dare to provoke him. Even if he could suppress his opponent, it wouldn't benefit him at all. After showing some struggle on his face, he suddenly turned around and rode the red-beaked eagle away. Yuan Jingqing saw him suddenly escape and was confused. Just now, when the pill auras collided, they were at most testing each other out. Even if his pill aura was stronger than his opponent's, it wasn't to the point where he could make the other turn around and run. The other rode a spirit bird and flew extremely fast. Since he hadn't learned any escape techniques, he realized that even if he chased after him now, he wouldn't be able to catch up, so he gave up. However, he had a feeling that he would meet this opponent again in the future. After thinking for a while, he took off the cloud raft and headed towards Qinsong School. 5 days later, a huge pillar-like mountain appeared in front of him. He stood in the sky and looked at it for a long time. His expression showed a hint of admiration, and he said, "This is the clear nether heavenly lake that senior brothers spoke of, the place where Master cultivated when he was young." He took a deep breath and urged the jade raft to turn into smoke and fly towards the top of the pillar cliff. Not long after, his figure disappeared into the clouds in the sky. Spring came and autumn passed, and winter and summer came and went. In the blink of an eye, 60 years had passed. The door of Duzhen Hall suddenly shook and then slowly opened with a rumble. Jing Yu, who was on duty outside, became excited and said with joy, "Master has come out of seclusion." In these 60 years, Zhang Yan had not only deduced the 5-element grand hand to a satisfactory level, but he had also created 2 other techniques. With his current Fa Li and the several true treasures on him, there weren't many people in the same generation who could be his opponent. However, if he had to deal with several opponents at the same time, he didn't have much confidence. Therefore, these 2 techniques were created to deal with such situations. During the 60 years of seclusion, there were many letters that were sent. After he ordered Jing Yu to deliver them, his gaze swept over the table and he had a general idea of what was going on. He waved his hand and one of the letters jumped out and landed in his hand. This was sent by Tao Jinhong 2 years ago. He said that his and Mi Jinren's Fa Li had recovered and all the required formation maps had been refined. Li Xiaomi had already communicated with the spiritual vigor of the Earth vein within a radius of 10,000 miles in the South Sea. At this moment, she could already set up a forbidden formation. It was just that Zhang Yan had not come out of seclusion, so the two of them didn't dare to act rashly. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. He asked, "Has there been any unusual movements in the Yuxiao school in these 60 years?" Jing Yu bowed and said, "Master, there hasn't been any big movements in the Yuxiao school. It's just that 40 years ago, Ming Huaping, a disciple of the Li Mountain sect, went to the Yuxiao school to cultivate. I heard that this incident made the Li Mountain sect master, Shen Zixin, very dissatisfied." Zhang Yan smiled faintly. He had seen Shen Zixin before. This woman's aptitude was not weak, and she also had the courage to be in charge of the sect. 100 years before Yuling's ascension, most of the secular affairs in the sect had been taken over by her. Even if she really had a different opinion on this matter, she wouldn't easily reveal it. The so-called dissatisfaction and so on were probably people purposely stirring up trouble behind her back. He thought for a moment and asked again, "What's the situation in the Li Mountain sect now?" Jing Yu replied, "After sect Master Shen succeeded the position, a few cultivators of the Shiha lower sect came out of nowhere. They said that the Li Mountain sect was originally the place of enlightenment of the Shiha family. Since Yuling Jinren has passed, they should choose another wise person and let the capable one take the top position. They are always making things difficult for the disciples of the Li Mountain sect outside and jumping up and down. They are extremely restless." Zhang Yan snorted coldly. This was a move of the Yuxiao sect. Their goal was nothing more than to win over the Li Mountain sect to their side. However, a Li Mountain sect without the Dongtian Jinren was obviously of no use to them. Therefore, they wanted to groom someone, and that Ming Huaping should be the person they wanted to win over. Although he promised Yuling Jinren to take care of the Li Mountain sect, Shen Zixin seemed to be able to temporarily stabilize the situation. Therefore, he didn't plan to interfere. Moreover, it was best for Yuxiao to set his sights on this place. He could take this opportunity to make some arrangements on the South Sea. After his thoughts settled, he reached out and formed 2 talismans. He then waved his sleeves lightly and sent them out. After the talismans flew out of the main hall, they flew in 2 directions. One of them flew out of the great pool of Dragon Abyss at the speed of lightning and then swept across the Donghua continent. It arrived above the vast ocean and landed on an island. Suddenly, a spiritual fog rushed up from below and swept up the talisman, causing it to rise into the sky. Finally, it entered into an unpredictable domain. Tao Jinhong was meditating in the small realm. Suddenly, he felt an aura coming from the outside. He came out of his meditation and lifted his sleeves to pull it over. His mana circulated within the talisman and he understood the meaning within. He took out a polished round stone from his sleeve and tossed it out. He said, "Is Taoist me here?" The stone didn't fly far before it suddenly trembled and hovered in midair. A ray of light appeared on it and Mi Jinren's voice came out. "Sect leader Tao, you usually don't look for me if there is nothing important. Tell me, what is it this time?" Tao Jinren bowed and said, "I have to tell Taoist me that Jinren Zhang has come out of seclusion and invited us to set up the formation altar in the South Sea." Mi Jinren snorted and said, "Got it. When do we leave?" Tao Jinren said, "Yuxiao school has occupied the Fengling Ocean and used small sects to fill up this realm. They have also set up Qi observation towers everywhere to detect our aura. If we use the Dragon Palace to move, it will be too big of a commotion and they will definitely notice it. We can only hide our aura and go there. We will leave in a while. When we get there, as long as we set up the formation map and match it with the spiritual opportunity of the earth veins, even if Yuxiao notices it, it will be too late to destroy the formation." Mi Jinren didn't say much. The ray of light flashed and disappeared. Tao Jinren held the rui in his hand and stood up from the stone. This time was different from the last time. If the formation was set up properly, it would be a real threat to the South Cliff. When Yuxiao comes to their senses, they would definitely use more aggressive methods than before. Perhaps it would not be any weaker than a real battle. However, this time, they had 3 Dongtians in charge, and with the help of the formation, it was impossible for Yu Xiao to attack without paying a certain price. He shook his sleeves, and within 1,000 miles, formation maps flew up from the surrounding stone pillars and fell into his sleeves. Deep in the South Sea, Li Xiaomi stood on the coral jade platform with his eyes closed. He was constantly using his mana to check the spiritual opportunity in the formation to see if there were any loopholes. For the past few decades, he had used millions of aquatic monsters to build more than 1,000 altars to communicate with the spiritual opportunity in the earth veins. The 3 highest altars were built on the highest peaks in the sea and were used as the altars for him, Tao Jinren, and Mi Jinren. Even though the domain that he had initially planned to set up had been completed, he did not stop his footsteps and continued to expand outwards. At this moment, a giant beast suddenly appeared in the formation. It looked like a whale or a dolphin with 4 short limbs. When it opened its eyes, it seemed to have the light of the sun and the moon. When it opened its huge mouth, it seemed to be able to swallow thousands of hectares of seawater. As soon as the beast appeared, the surroundings were in chaos. Li Xiaomi suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "You still won't settle down? Let's see how long you can toss around." He suddenly let out a low roar, and a dragon's roar came from his throat. In an instant, the water monster giant elephant suddenly burst like a bubble. In its original place, there was only a white strange insect that looked like a shellfish but not a shellfish. It had no feet or hands, and there were some hard gravel on the outer edge of its hard shell. There were 6 long whiskers floating in front of its mouth. Half of its body was buried in the sand and seemed to be trying to squeeze out at this moment. Li Xiaomi waved his sleeves, and a ray of spiritual light hit the insect. It trembled violently and then stayed still. All the aquatic monsters saw this scene, and under the scolding of many shape-shifted monsters, they also calmed down. Li Xiaomi made a few more gestures and then ignored them. After he caught the mirage worm here, this situation seemed to have happened many times. However, he valued its ability to create strange illusions, so he kept it and wanted to cultivate it into an outer body incarnation. After more than 60 years, he was almost at the point of success. This mirage worm also sensed the impending crisis, so it resisted more and more. However, it was still under control and did not disrupt the overall situation. At this moment, a ray of spiritual light fell from the sky. His expression turned solemn, and he used his mana to receive it. He used his spiritual vigor, and his eyes suddenly sharpened. He thought to himself, "Finally, this is the time. Dozens of years of hard work are about to see the results." Just as the various sects of Donghua were planning for the great calamity, outside the void sky, 7 giant cauldrons shaped like stars flew in. When they were about to reach the 9 continents, a cloud of erratic black smoke and demonic aura flew out from each cauldron and finally gathered in one place. It was at least 10,000 miles wide. After a long while, the demonic aura suddenly gathered and turned into a yellow-robed Taoist. He sneered and looked down. With a slap of his hand, he shattered one of the cauldrons, and then turned it into countless fragments that fell toward the Donghua continent. At the same time, all the true masters of the grotto heavens in the continent felt an enormous demonic aura coming toward the 9 continents. The aura was even stronger than the heavenly demon that had previously wreaked havoc in Donghua. When the countless broken cauldron pieces broke through the 9 layers of high clouds, they rubbed against the outer heavenly sand and were continuously worn down. When they passed through the sky above the continent, most of them did not pose a threat. However, when they fell from the sky, they were like thousands of meteors passing through the sky. It was strange and magnificent. When they landed on the ground, they created holes, and then wisps of black smoke came out from them. With a whirl, they drilled into the various demonic caves of various sizes underground. Chapter 1070. Zhang Yan, who was in the Palace of Purity Truth, also sensed the changes outside the virtual sky. What was different from the rest of the Grotto Heaven people was that the 9 demon suppression scroll hidden in between his brows was actually jumping around, as if it was a demon that could be swallowed. Ever since he reached the fifth transformation of the divine perception, the scroll had quietened down, as if it had no intention of absorbing any more essence. He also felt that it was impossible for him to find a fortuitous encounter to advance to the next realm in this world. However, with such a change today, there must be some kind of change that he could look forward to. He changed his mind. The appearance of the heavenly demon was too sudden, and the situation was not clear yet. Therefore, the South Sea attack that he originally planned had to be delayed. He immediately ordered Jing Yu to send 2 more letters to where Tao Jinren and Li Xiaomi were. He wanted them to stop fighting and wait for this matter to pass before making any moves. At this moment he suddenly heard the sound of a bell in the upper extreme hall. His expression changed slightly, knowing that it was Chi Yun Tian who invited him. He stepped through the formation door and went outside, heading towards the upper extreme hall. Halfway there, he saw a golden light flying over. It was Hu Xian who heard the sound from the daylight hall and similarly came over. The two of them greeted each other and entered the hall together. They exchanged greetings with Chi Yun Tian before sitting down. Chi Yun Tian said solemnly, "The foul demonic energy outside the sky, the two of you should have noticed it. The person who came should be the body of the heavenly demon, suspected to be Sima Quan. Junior brother Hua had fought with him before. I wonder if it is him?" Hua Xian's expression turned solemn. This person's aura is the same as Sima Quan's. He is definitely the demon. However, whether or not it is still the original is still up for discussion. Zhang Yan also said, "Ancestor Jing Tsang, who gave me the small world, told me that dozens of years ago, there was an item that went to the virtual sky. Calculating the time, it was senior brother Hua. After killing the demon in Dongsheng, I think it was Sima Quan. Now that he has returned, he must have gotten some kind of opportunity outside the sky." Hua Xian said solemnly, "After killing Sima Quan's demonic body, I thought that even if the demonic poison was left in the world, it wouldn't be of much use. Who would have thought that dozens of years later, it would be even stronger than before? Otherwise, today's change wouldn't have happened." Chi Yun Tian said, "This is not Junior Hua's fault. During the devil tribulation, he was blessed by fate energy. Otherwise, Sima Quan would not have become the chaotic world demon. It's just that this devil is a great calamity for our Xian sect, so I've invited my 2 junior brothers over to discuss countermeasures." Zhang Yan pondered for a moment and said, "Judging by the demon's current aura, it is impossible for him to go against our Donghua and Xian demon families." However, he returned with such great fanfare, as if he was afraid that others wouldn't know. There must be a reason for this. Hua Xian turned his gaze over. "Junior brother Zhang, did you see anything?" Zhang Yan shook his head. He did not know much about Sima Quan's reasons for doing so. It was hard to see through him at the moment. Hua Xian pondered deeply for a moment before he said, "Why don't we wait for a while? This devil is still in the outer space, and we're paying attention to every single one of his actions, so he shouldn't be able to cause any great waves. If he really has any intentions, then he won't delay for too long, and we'll be able to see the outcome in a short period of time." Zhang Yan nodded his head and said, "Senior brother is right. However, just in case, I can go to the Azure Sky Hall to hold the fort. If he really comes to the 9 regions, I can stop him." Chi Yun Tian pondered for a while. With Zhang Yan's ability, this devil definitely wouldn't be able to come over smoothly. As long as he could stop him, the Qinsong School's heavenly abodes would be able to help. So he agreed, "Let's do that first." Zhang Yan had another thought and said, "There's one more thing. If the Shaoqing Jinren sees this devil, I'm afraid they'll take the initiative to fight him. I'd like to ask sect leader to write a letter to the Shaoqing Jinren. It's not suitable for our 2 families to make a move for now, and we'll decide after seeing the situation." Chi Yun Tian nodded his head. Junior brother's reminder is right. We should inform fellow Taoist Shaoqing. After the heavenly devil appeared, no one from Shaoqing came out to fight. It was probably because of Ying Chuanxiu's suppression. However, if they sent out the name of the overall situation, it would be easier to suppress the situation. After the 3 finished their discussion, Zhang Yan left the upper extreme hall and turned into a ray of clear light. He ascended to the Azure Sky Hall and looked towards the void sky. He saw that there were only 6 cauldrons there, and the demonic smoke that was 10,000 miles long had disappeared. The devil had already escaped into it. From this, it could be deduced that the devil was also afraid of the poisonous fire and strong qi. It could only survive in the void sky with the help of this treasured cauldron. After looking for a while, the demon-vanquishing slip suddenly jumped non-stop again. His eyes flickered and he calmed it down with a thought. Not long after he sat there, he suddenly saw a hexagonal palace floating towards the azure sky hall from outside the void sky. The size of the palace was hard to distinguish. It seemed to be wide and small at the same time, as if a painting was unfolded. After he saw him, his body swayed and released a clone into the void. He asked, "Are you Jinren Jingtsong?" There was a flash of light in the palace, and a gray-robed Daoran with an old face came out. He bowed and said, "Greetings, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said with a smile, "Jinren is wandering outside the void sky. Are you here for that heavenly devil?" Grandmaster Jingtsong said, "That devil has already sensed my presence here. It won't be long before he comes to find me. Daoran, I'm just a clone, so there's nothing to be afraid of. However, this celestial palace won't be able to be protected. Coming to your place, I hope that I can be safe." Zhang Yan smiled. He knew that the other party was just a clone, but he wasn't as weak as he said. Otherwise, Sima Quan would have come to find him the moment he discovered the startling sky palace. The reason why he didn't make a move was probably because he was worried. So he said, "If Jinren is willing to stay here, I will gladly welcome you." After half a month, the Jinren from the various sects felt that even though the heavenly devil was still in the void, the spiritual vigor of the 9 continents was much thinner than before. It was obvious that some of it had been stolen by some means. At the mountain gate of Butian Pavilion, sect leader Tan Dingxian frowned. He didn't expect another wave to come before the first wave subsided. Now, he had already obtained a coiling wood leaf from the Supreme Sky sect. With the help of this item, the sect had once again returned to the sky. However, he was no longer able to roam freely like before, and he could only drift along with the wind. However, this was also a temporary measure. Every time the spiritual vigor of heaven and earth decreased, the mountain gate would become heavier. This time, the heavenly devil appeared out of nowhere, causing the mountain gate to sink even more. And this was still outside the void sky. It was hard to imagine what would happen if it was in the Donghua continent. Bu Jingsu sighed and said, "Senior apprentice brother, why don't I go to Yuxiao school and ask for their help to get rid of this devil?" Tan Dingxian shook his head and said, "Yuxiao school won't help." He could see clearly that Yuxiao did not even fight when the formation was set up on the Fengling Ocean. Why would they risk losing their cultivation to fight the devil outside the void sky? After a sigh, he said, "Junior apprentice brother, you still need to go. If I don't mention it, Yuxiao will definitely pretend to be deaf and dumb. At least mention it. At least they will be able to help in times of danger." Bu Jingsu said, "All right. But do I need to bring 1 or 2 magical treasures to Yuxiao?" Tan Dingxian said, "The magical treasures in the sect were originally reserved to deal with the devil's doctrine. Forget it, dealing with the heavenly devil is more important. Bring 2 top-grade magical treasures with you, lest Yuxiao thinks that we only know how to ask for help." Bu Jingsu stood up from the cattail hassock and said, "I will leave now." At the foot of Mount Kunshe, tens of thousands of feet deep, on the devil's doctrine's ritual altar, rays of light and shadows suddenly appeared. Not long after, 6 figures appeared. They were the 6 sects of the devil's doctrine because of the appearance of the heavenly devil outside the void sky. Together, they discussed countermeasures. When Qingxiang looked around and saw that on the cliff of the cave not far away, there were insects that were as black as ink and looked like black cicadas. He raised his eyebrows and said, "I didn't expect this place to be invaded by such a devil." Zhenren Li reached out and took one of them. With a gentle pinch, the insect hissed and turned into a wisp of black smoke that dissipated. He said in a deep voice, "The devil insects are formed from the purest yin qi, and there is a lot of dirty yin qi here. It is the devil insect's favorite place." Zhenren Wei said coldly, Recently, the turbid yin qi in the spirit cave of the Yuan Mirage sect has gradually decreased. I think it is because of these devil insects. Jinren Huan sighed and said, "It is not only your sect, it is the same for my Hunqing sect. These insects are everywhere, and there is no end to them. I think the sects of the various sects have also been invaded." Jinren Lu of the Jiuling sect said with a gloomy face, "These devil insects can climb all over the spirit cave and devour spiritual opportunity. When they accumulate to a certain amount, they will attack my sect's disciples and devour their flesh and blood. My sect has already thought of a way to seal it. However, this is something that Sima Quan intentionally did. As long as this person does not die, we will not be able to get rid of these insects." Zhenren Li said, "This is the reason why I invited everyone here today. Sima Quan is proficient in our sect's phase reversal technique, and he can use these devil insects to transfer the spiritual opportunity they devour into his own body. In other words, even if he lives outside, he will grow stronger all the time. Even if he does not come to the 9 continents, his cultivation will continue to improve, and the spiritual opportunity of our sect's spirit cave will continue to decrease. If we do not deal with him as soon as possible, he will become a great threat to our generation sooner or later." When the Jinren heard this, they all felt horrified. It was not hard to imagine that Sima Quan was like a poisonous insect climbing the 9 continents, devouring the spiritual opportunity of this world. Jinren Wei's eyes revealed a ruthless look, and he said, "In that case, we can only act as soon as possible." When Qingxiang opened his mouth and said, "Everyone, Sima Quan needs to be dealt with eventually, but taking the initiative to attack is not the best plan." Everyone turned to look at Zhang Xian. Zhenren Li said, "What does Daoist Wen think?" When Qingxiang smiled and said, "Since the spiritual opportunity of the world is dissipating, Xian men should be more anxious than me. Moreover, they do not know of my abnormality. If we continue to wait, they will not be able to endure it." Everyone thought about it for a moment and nodded their heads. Now that the turbidity had dissipated, other than the 3 major sects of Xian men, the other sects were struggling to maintain the spirit cave. What Sima Quan did was tantamount to tearing open a wound that could not be healed. Xuanmen's desire to get rid of him was more urgent than theirs. When Qingxiang said again, "If we want to act, we need to fight Sima Quan outside the void. Since this person dared to steal spiritual opportunity so brazenly, he should have thought of the consequences of doing so. He must be prepared. If I go there and take him down, it will be fine. If I fail to take him down, the damage to my cultivation is only a small matter. If I am not careful, it is very likely that I will end up being devoured by him." Everyone's heart trembled. None of them had cultivated to the 3rd stage of the elephant realm. If they fought outside the void, once they encountered danger, they would not be able to escape into their own caves. At that time, they would not even be able to escape. Jinren Gai of the Bone sect said, "Daoist Wen, are you saying that this Sima Quan deliberately set up a trap to lure us there?" When Qingxiang said, "That may not be the case, but it should be my goal. We can send someone to negotiate with him later and see what he wants." Zhenren Li said, "Who will go?" When Qingxiang smiled and said, "Since I suggested it, of course I will go." Zhenren Gai said, "Even if Zhenren Wen's blood doppelganger is no different from your own body, it is still easy for the Sky Demon to take advantage of it. I can send a demonic weapon. Even if it is destroyed, it will not be a big loss." Zhenren Li said, "This method is appropriate. The calamity is coming, and we are weaker than Xianmen. We must find a way to protect ourselves and not easily lose our cultivation." Everyone nodded in agreement. Zhenren Gai said, "I will start the spell now. Please wait here." Just as he was speaking, a ball of fire suddenly flew out from the Donghua continent. It passed through the 9 layers of high cloud and flew towards the 6 cauldrons. After a day, they finally arrived in front of the 6 mountain-like cauldrons. The ball of fire opened, and a skeleton came out. He was wearing a Taoist robe and a Dharma crown. His skeleton was very big and stretched out the robe. From afar, he looked like a paper man that had been cut. He bowed and said, "Daoist Sima, are you here? Gai Su of the Bone sect is here." After a while, A black smoke came out of the cauldron and turned into a yellow-robed Taoist. He stared at him for a moment and said, "Zhenren Gai?" Gai Su bowed and said, "Yes, it is me." Sima Quan snorted and said, "I thought you would come back after a few days. I didn't expect you to be so impatient." Zhenren Gai ignored his sarcasm and said, "I was asked by the Zenrins of the various sects to come here and ask, what is your intention? Ask me what I want to do?" Sima Quan laughed coldly and pointed at the 6 cauldrons. He said, "I want to set up another sect in the void beyond this sky, called the Dark Een Sky Palace. No matter if it is mystic or demonic sect, as long as they are willing to join my sect, they can call me by my name. I can then bring them here and teach them the art of immortality and supernatural powers." Gai Su was shocked and said, "You want to set up a sect here?" Sima Quan looked over and said, "Why not?" His previous experiences had already told him that there was a way out by compromising. Instead of hiding, it was better to be forceful. He had a fateful encounter beyond the sky. Not only did his mana recover, but he also learned many supernatural powers and Taoist techniques. For example, the 6-een poisonous bug that he sent to the Donghua continent was one of them. Combined with the phase reversal technique, he could collect the spiritual opportunity of the 9 continents. The few elemental Yuan Palace cauldrons that he obtained from beyond the sky were enough to build the prototype of a palace. With this as the foundation to accept disciples, it would not be difficult to set up a sect. As a heavenly demon, he naturally did not do this to set up a sect, but to put on a skin so that he could openly share the spiritual opportunity of the world with the various grotto heavens. When this message was sent out, as long as the various sects did not want to fight him to the death, they would likely tacitly agree. When he achieved great success and became a Gen-een demon, there would be no need to be afraid. However, if Zhu Zhen insisted on fighting him, he was not afraid. With the 6-een poisonous bug in the Donghua Devil's Cave to provide spiritual opportunity for him, he did not believe that anyone could outlast him outside the virtual sky. After winning a few times, he would naturally achieve his goal. Chapter 1071. After negotiating with Sima Quan, Taoist Master Gai said, "I will inform the Taoists of the various sects about this. I will inform you later." Sima Quan sneered, "I will only inform you about this. I don't need your approval to do it or not." Taoist Master Gai did not speak and bowed. Then, his body seemed to have lost its support and collapsed, turning into dust in the void. Sima Quan sneered, "Are you afraid that I will do something and bring me back? You are careful. But so what? In the future Sima Quan, will not need to listen to you." At the same time, the Devil Doctrine Zhenren at the foot of Mount Kunsher also learned of Sima Quan's purpose from Taoist Master Gai. Taoist Master Wei frowned and said, "He is a heavenly demon. What is the use of having disciples?" Heavenly demons did not need to cultivate. As long as they breathed in and out turbid-een spiritual opportunity or devoured the souls of cultivators, they could increase their magical power. Even if they met their own kind, they would kill each other first and would never let the other go. Even if they taught their disciples, they would end up in a miserable state. Taoist Master Huan said, even if those disciples were taken to the void, there would be no spiritual opportunity for them to cultivate unless, Taoist Master Lu said in a low voice, unless all of his disciples know the demonic insect technique. Everyone's heart sank when they heard this. If that was true, the number of disciples in the heavenly demon sect would increase, and the spiritual opportunity they absorbed would increase as well. Taoist Master Gai's expression changed and he said, "Just now, my disciple reported to me that a disciple in my sect turned into black smoke and flew to the void." Everyone was startled for a moment. Then they came to their senses. Sima Quan was already making his move. When Qingxiang asked, "How talented is this disciple?" Taoist Master Gai fell silent, as if he was asking. After a while, he gave the answer, saying, "His talent and aptitude are all mediocre." When Qingxiang said thoughtfully, "Is this his intention?" Taoist Master Li said in a low voice, "Did you think of something?" When Qingxiang said, "In the 6 sects and even the 10 sects of Shen Men, There are inevitably many disciples with bad intentions. They don't cultivate diligently and want to take shortcuts. It's usually not the right story. Tao Master Wei said disdainfully, "That's only natural. My spirit gate has been silent for tens of thousands of years. If the disciples of the later generation aren't strong-willed, their Tao hearts aren't righteous, and their talents aren't good, how can they compete with the profound gate? I don't care about such a stupid thing." Wen Qingxiang said, "But now he has another way out, and that is to go to the heavenly devil palace and seek refuge with Sima Quan." Spiritual Master Wei knitted his brows and said, "So what? What can these people do?" Wen Qingxiang smiled faintly and said, "Now 1 and 2. They might not be able to see anything, but as time went on, they would all benefit from it. I'm afraid that it will cause the disciples of other sects to compete to imitate them. They will no longer be willing to cultivate in peace and seek refuge with the sky demon. If the disciples of the demon palace can also seize the spiritual opportunity, then once the number of them increases, it will definitely cause the stability of our spirit points and the people's hearts to waver. More and more people will seek refuge with the sky demon. The situation will only get worse." As soon as these words came out, everyone present was horrified. At this time, Spiritual Master Li said, "Everyone, this is only fellow Taoist Wen's guess. Moreover, the current situation is far from that step." Wen Qingxiang nodded and said with a smile, "That's right. Whether it's true or not, I can't be sure. But sooner or later, the sky demon must be eradicated. It's just that I don't have to do it. We can beat them at their own game and pretend to announce that we have already agreed to Sima Quan's conditions for establishing a sect. Then we can spread the news and wait for the disciples of Taoist Shenmen to be taken to outer space. I don't believe that they will still be able to sit still." Outside the void, a muddy fog flew straight towards the 6 giant cauldrons in the sky. After reaching the inner room, the fog dispersed and a cultivator appeared on the ground. After a long time, the cultivator finally woke up. He climbed up from where he was and looked around. He saw that he was in a hall with gold and copper pillars. There was a pedestal with a yellow-robed Taoist sitting on it. He hurriedly knelt down and said, "Are you the master of the mystic Yin Demon Palace? I heard that the master can impart divine abilities to those who are fated with him in the Donghua continent, so I specially came to be your disciple." As he said this, he knocked his forehead heavily on the ground. Sima Quan said, "Looking at your solid foundation, you don't come from a small sect. What is your name? Which sect are you originally from?" The disciple hurriedly said, "My name is Yu Shao. I originally cultivated under the Bone Yin sect." Sima Quan said, "Yu Shao, since you are from the Bone Yin sect, why did you come to be my disciple?" Yu Shao said, "I dare not lie to the master. Because I offended an elder in the sect, he has been making things difficult for me ever since he passed away. He has never imparted his Tao and Xian skills to me. In the past dozens of years, I have only learned a little bit. Seeing that everyone in the sect is progressing, I am extremely unwilling. Yesterday, I heard that the master is opening the sect to teach everyone without discrimination, so I am willing to come and seek shelter." Sima Quan laughed and said, "Very good. From today onwards, you are my 3rd disciple. I can bestow you with divine abilities. In the future, when your cultivation is successful, you can also be like me and transform into a heavenly demon. As long as your divine qi doesn't decline, you will never die." As he said this, he stretched out his hand and a talisman fell into the space between his eyebrows. Yu Shao was stunned at first, but after he refined the talisman with his mana, his face revealed a look of ecstasy. He kowtowed on the ground and said, "Thank you, Master, for giving me the technique." The technique that Sima Quan passed on did not require him to cultivate and meditate every day. It also did not depend on one's aptitude. As long as one continuously refined the demon worms and sent them to Donghua continent, they could provide spiritual vigor and watch one's cultivation progress. And when one's cultivation improved, one could control more demon worms. One could then go to Donghua continent and live a carefree life without much of the hardships of cultivation. He thought to himself, "Looks like seeking shelter from the heavenly demon palace was the right choice." Sima Quan said, "You can cultivate here. After you have refined the 16 demon worm, you can go to Donghua continent and recruit more disciples for me." Since he had established another sect, he naturally could not do everything by himself. So, he had to give more benefits to those who came to seek shelter first so that they would work harder. Once his 16 demon worm was controlled and refined, the absorption of spiritual vigor would be many times faster than before. The higher the cultivation of the disciples and the more people there were, the more benefits he would receive. Therefore, he needed to attract more people to this place. Yu Shao said, "Yes, if master has no instructions. Disciple will go and cultivate now." Sima Quan waved his hand and ordered him to leave. Not long after, 2 more clouds of smoke entered the hall. After the smoke dispersed, 2 seductive women in white came out and kowtowed. They said in unison, "Disciple greets master." Sima Quan looked at one of the women and frowned, "Why are you missing an arm?" The woman said in fear, "Disciple was careless during cultivation and was injured by a Xianmen disciple." Sima Quan changed his mind. He said, "In that case, I will teach the 2 of you a mutual possession technique. If your body is damaged, you can think of a way to take another suitable body so that your cultivation won't be hindered." Back when he was being chased by the Profound and Demon clans, his demonic sense doppelgangers were almost completely destroyed, so he hid his divine sense doppelgangers in their bodies. He originally wanted to leave a way out for himself, but now it was no longer necessary. Now was the time to use people and could officially take them in. He threw down a jade scroll and said, "Go and take a look. If there is anything you don't understand, come and ask me." The 2 female disciples quickly kowtowed to thank their master. Sima Quan waved his sleeve and raised a gust of cold wind, sending the 2 to the side hall. He turned to look at the Donghua continent below and thought, within 3 months, if the spiritual gate does not send anyone, it means that they have tacitly agreed to my actions. However, the Xianmen might not agree. However, in the history of establishing a sect, there has never been a smooth journey. If they send someone to fight with me, I will let them know my methods. Very quickly, a month passed. Zhang Yan looked at the 6 cauldrons in the Azure Sky Hall. These days, he could feel that after the addition of the Sky Demon, the spiritual opportunity was less than before. However, as long as the Sky Demon did not come to the Donghua continent to harm living beings, he would not make a move for now. As for the matter of Sima Quan wanting to establish a sect beyond the heavens, he had heard about it. However, the demonic sect was silent. Even Bu Tian Pavilion invited them to discuss matters at the Pai Palace. They did not respond at all. Their attitude was quite thought-provoking. However, Sima Quan was a sky demon. He and the demonic sect were natural enemies. He did not believe that they would let this demon go. They were waiting for the Xianmen to make a move so that they could reap the benefits. Jing Yu carefully walked over and bowed. "Master, Spiritual Master Pang from Huanjin Temple requests an audience." Zhang Yan nodded. "He should be here." With a thought, a clone was already sitting in the outer hall of the Duzhen Hall. After a while, Spiritual Master Pang entered the hall. After seeing him, he bowed and said, "Greetings, Spiritual Master Zhang. I hope you will forgive me for visiting without notice." Zhang Yan returned the greeting and said, "Spiritual Master Pang, please take a seat." Spiritual Master Pang thanked him and sat down on the guest seat. He then looked over and said, "Your sect also knows about the Sky Demon?" Zhang Yan, "I have heard about it." Spiritual Master Pang sighed and said in a deep voice, "The Sky Demon appeared outside the heavens in such a big way and even threatened to establish a sect. My Huanjin Temple definitely cannot sit back and watch. We want to subdue the demon." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "This is the intention of your sect's Master Pu?" Spiritual Master Pang said seriously, "Yes. However, Qinsong School and Huanjin Temple are allies, so the Master Spiritual Master wanted me to come here and greet your sect first." Zhang Yan also understood why he did this. Huanjin Temple had always upheld the principle of subduing demons and protecting Tao. Previously, the Sky Demon was hiding everywhere and it was hard to find him. But now he dared to appear outside the heavens. How could they tolerate it? When spiritual master Pang reached the level of Dong Tianjinren, although he did not change his determination to subdue the demon, he could still judge the situation and would not act rashly. However, his disciples were shallow in knowledge. If they knew about this and saw their elders ignoring the demon, their Dao heart would be shaken. He thought for a while and said, "I know your sect's difficulties, but I have to offend you. If your sect does not win this battle, what should you do?" Spiritual Master Pang said seriously, "I can bring my Huanjin Temple's demon subduing twin mirrors. It will not be difficult to subdue the demon." Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "The sky demon is invisible and has been hiding in the void for almost 100 years. It is hard to know what kind of opportunity it has. Even if your sect has the power to subdue the demon, I'm afraid you have nowhere to use it." Spiritual Master Pang knew that he was not trying to nitpick, but it was the truth. He thought for a while and said, "Then what does Spiritual Master Zhang want to teach me?" Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and sent a jade box down, saying, "After the sky demon came to Donghua, he had placed this in every demon's cave in the continent." Spiritual Master Pang opened the box and saw a demon bug. She looked at it for a while and a red glow suddenly appeared in her eyes. With a swoosh, the bug immediately turned into ashes. She put down the jade box and looked up, asking, "Where did you get this from, Spiritual Master?" Zhang Yan said, "There is a small demon's cave in my Qinsong school, and I found it there. I have sent my disciples to suppress it." Spiritual Master Pang frowned and said, "If I am not wrong, this demon bug seems to be able to absorb spiritual vigor. Sima Quan is proficient in the art of phase reversal. Is he using this bug to feed himself?" Zhang Yan nodded and praised, "Not bad, Spiritual Master Pang is very accurate." Spiritual Master Pang's expression was solemn, and he said, "If this bug is not eliminated, the sky demon will not be completely destroyed." Zhang Yan said, "Therefore, I thought that your disciples might as well go to various places to suppress the demon bug. As for Pingdu sect, there are many small demons' caves everywhere, so there must be a lot of demon bugs accumulated there. It is just that they did not say anything because of their pride. Your sect specializes in the art of subduing demons, and as an ally, you might as well lend a hand." Spiritual Master Pang's expression turned serious, and he said, "It is my duty." Zhang Yan said again, "As for the matter of the sky demon, I can make an agreement with you. If the devil sect still does not make a move after 3 years, I will personally go beyond the 9 heavens and kill this guy." Yuan Yang sect, Mingbai Mountain, and Shadow Pool. A middle-aged Taoist with white hair on his temples and a resolute face was sitting on a green stone by the pool, looking at a green rainbow sword gleam in his hand. As he looked back and forth, the sword gleam flashed across the sword, and after a while, it turned into a 3-feet-long magic sword, whistling and trembling, as if it could turn into a ray of light and fly out at any time. Spiritual Master Wu, who was wearing a thin gauze robe, walked slowly from behind. Her delicate hand rested on his shoulder, and there was a hint of worry in her eyes, and she said, "Senior Marshal Brother, are you really going to kill the sky demon?" The middle-aged Taoist took a deep breath, and the sword gleam turned into a ray of white light, and entered his mouth and nose. He said, "What sect leader Spiritual Master said is right. The calamity is coming, and all the sects are divided, and each has their own plans. Yuan Yang sect can't do nothing. The sky demon has appeared, and this is the time for me to speak up." Spiritual Master Wu said, "Senior Marshal Brother, why don't I go with you?" The middle-aged Taoist shook his head and said, "No, if the two of us go, how can we show Yuan Yang sect's power? Besides, if we fight outside the 9 heavens, it will definitely damage our cultivation. If we both go, we won't be able to recover our mana as soon as possible." Yuan Yang sect had a technique called Yin and Yang mutual enhancement. If 2 enlightened masters became Taoist companions, if one's mana was damaged, the other only needed to transfer a part of their mana to the other, and then use the Yin and Yang mutual enhancement technique to cultivate their mana. As long as the damage was not too severe, it would take at most 3 to 4 years to recover their mana. Spiritual Master Wu was still worried and said, "The sky demon has many tricks, and sect leader Spiritual Master didn't say that we can't go together." When we get there, I won't do anything, I'll just stand by and watch for senior martial brother. The middle-aged Taoist hesitated, and thought of all the strange tricks of the sky demon, and said, "All right, but remember, this is related to the reputation of our sect. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't help me." Chapter 1072. The middle-aged Taoist meditated in front of the pond for a whole night. When the sun rose into the sky, a boy came looking for him and said that the headmaster wanted to see him. So he and Wu Zhenren held hands and walked towards the main hall of Yuanyang sect, the Yuan Jingxin Hall. Yuanyang sect was different from other sections. There were no mountains or valleys in the sect. Instead, hundreds of palaces and halls were built on flat plains and water walls. It was wide and spacious, covering thousands of miles. After the two of them left the shadow pool, they could see the gilded dome of Jingxin Hall from afar because there were no lush trees blocking their view. This hall was higher than all the other halls, and it overlooked the plains. The atmosphere was awe-inspiring, and the entire hall was constructed from colored glass. Under the sunlight, it was overflowing with brilliant colors, and it was magnificent, displaying the brilliance of the sun. The two of them leaped into the air and turned into rays of light, leaping into the air. In a blink of an eye, they arrived at the main entrance of the palace and landed on the ground. There were two ancient bronze bells that were engraved with dragon patterns and beast faces. One on the left and the other on the right. They were used to suppress all evils. When the two of them arrived, it was inevitable that the clear air would leak out. Immediately, it triggered the reaction of the metal stone beneath their feet. A wisp of white gold air was released and collided with the bell. Immediately, a deep and resounding sound was heard. Under the eaves of the main hall, a silver bell immediately responded and shook gently. At the same time, there was also the sound of drums. The thumping sound was like thunder. In front of the hall, there were 2 rows of sword boys in black, about 100 of them. The boy in front heard the sound and quickly walked down the stairs. He bowed and said, "Zhenrens, the headmaster is waiting for you in the main hall." The middle-aged Taoist tidied up his robe and walked up the jade stairs. He crossed the bridge of green and walked past the platform. After a while, he finally stepped into the main hall. Raising his head, he saw Chu Rui, the head of Yuanyang sect, sitting on the main seat. He had a dignified face, with handsome eyebrows and plump cheeks. Although he was handsome, he did not lose his vigor. He was wearing a red sun movement robe, with 3 rainbows circling around him. Above his head, there was a dazzling golden light, and there was the sound of sword chi clashing. The middle-aged Taoist could only see a white light in front of him. He quickly looked away and thought, "I haven't seen him for a long time, but the headmaster's cultivation level seems to have improved a lot." The reason why the Yuanyang sect dared to compete with the other 3 sects, and claimed to be the 4th most powerful sect among the outer mysterious sects, was because of the profound cultivation base of this sect leader Chu, whose cultivation base was comparable to that of the leaders of the other 3 sections. The Yuanyang sect was located in the center of Donghua. Although it had the geographical advantage, it was surrounded by the Dark Tsang sect to the north, the Southern Hua sect and Taihao sect to the east, and the Li Mountain sect and Huanzhen sect to the west. When he was the previous sect leader, he felt powerless against the alliance of Nanhua and Taihao sects. It was only after Chu Rui succeeded the position that he regained his prestige and suppressed the 2 sections. Even though the other 2 sects went to Yuxiao in the end, it was because Yuanyang sect had only been established for a short period of time. Their foundation was slightly lacking, and they were still unable to compete with the 3 great Xianmen. It was not Chu Rui's fault. Therefore, the disciples of the same generation always admired this senior brother. The 2 of them walked to the front of the hall steps and saluted, "Greetings, sect master." Chu Rui raised his hand and said, "Junior brother Wu, junior sister Wu, there's no need to be so polite. Sit down and talk." In the hall, other than the seat of the sect leader, there were 4 futons. The 2 of them saluted again and sat down on the right side of the hall. Chu Rui said, "Junior brother Wu, I heard from junior sister Wu that you have taken the Thunderdust sword to practice?" Wu Zhenren bowed slightly and said, Yes, one more day and I will be done with it. At the latest, the day after tomorrow, I can go and kill the demon. In the main hall of the Yuanyang sect, there were more than 10 magic swords left by the ancestors of the Yuanyang sect, which could be used to fight against all kinds of enemies. In order to deal with the Sky Devil, he took the Thunder Dust Sword, which was the most deadly weapon against the evil creatures. Chu Rui smiled. I thought that junior brother might as well bring this sword. He waved his hand and a black light flew into the hall. It landed on the ground and turned into a Xian sword. It stood upright on the ground and was as tall as a person. The sword box was heavy and wide, and it looked like a sword monument. Wu Zhenren was shocked. The first Yuan Zhongyu sword? Although it was called a sword, it was actually a magical weapon. Not to mention that it could be divided and combined, it could also generate boundless energy. It was said that when a strong cultivator wielded it, he could control everything within 1,000 miles, from a speck of dust to a mountain. Even if it was shapeless, it could not escape its control. Wu Zhenren originally wanted this sword, but it was a real treasure. Without the approval of the spirit, it would not go with him. Now that it was placed here, it was obvious that Chu Rui had tried to convince him. Chu Rui said, Junior brother, it is not easy to kill the demon. I will lend you this sword. However, the sword aura in this sword can withstand thousands of mountains. Although it is powerful, it takes a lot of energy. Junior brother, you must use it carefully. Wu Zhenren replied. He stared at the sword of Zhongyu for a moment and used his spirit to guide it. The sword swayed and turned into a black ray that rushed into his sleeve. In an instant he felt a heavy pressure on his body. He quickly used his mana to suppress it, but even so, he could not stabilize it. Wu Zhenren took a few steps forward and bowed. Senior brother, if you want to refine this sword for your own use, it will take at least half a month. Could you please forgive me for a few more days? Chu Rui smiled. Of course. There is no need for half a month. Let's use a month as the deadline. I will give the two of you 3 contract fruits, and you can use less energy. The two of them were overjoyed and quickly thanked him. As they were in a hurry to refine the sword, after a few more words, they excused themselves. Chu Rui said, Junior Wu, please stay for a moment. I have something to tell you. Wu Zhenren bowed and said, Then, senior brother, I will excuse myself. Chu Rui nodded. After he left, he looked at Wu Zhenren and said, Junior Wu, I heard that junior brother Wu is going to fight. Is that true? Wu Zhenren looked at him and said seriously, Did senior sister Wen say that senior brother Wu knows about this? Yes, this is what I want. Ever since senior brother Wu formed the cave, he has never fought with his peers. He is not like Zhang Zhenren of Qinsong School who is good at fighting. I am worried about him going alone. Chu Rui smiled. When did I say that I am not allowed? Wu Zhenren lowered his head and bowed slightly. I have been rude. Chu Rui said, Even if you did not go, I still wanted to find someone to protect junior brother Lu. It would be best if you were there. However, I need you to do something for me. Wu Zhenren saw his serious expression and guessed that it must be something important. His expression turned serious and said, Senior brother, please speak. I am listening. Chu Rui thought for a while and said, After you go up to the sky, I need you to find an item in the 6 cauldrons where the sky demon is hiding. Wu Zhenren was stunned. She did not expect it to be something like this. However, she felt that it was not something simple. She thought for a while and said, May I ask, what is it? Chu Rui said calmly, Since I asked junior sister to get it, I will not hide it from you. He paused and said, When the West continent was flourishing, Donghua was still filthy. There was a mighty cultivator who came from outside the sky who wanted to capture a Genin demon for his own use. However, he was afraid that it would damage the continent during the fight, so he was stopped by the cultivators of the West continent. The mighty cultivator seemed to be obedient and no longer insisted on his own opinion. He went to the West continent to spread his teachings and set up a sect. However, he did not give up on this idea secretly. He invited several peers with similar attainments to go to heaven and earth to collect rare treasures. After more than 1,000 years, he refined a magic weapon called the Orificeless Essence Jade. If we carry this item with us and use it to travel through the void, we will not have to worry about damaging our spiritual vigor. If it is placed in a sect, it can also nourish the spirit point and make up for the deficiency. Hearing this, Wu Zhenren had already faintly sensed something and asked, "What happened next?" Chu Rui said, "On the day the treasure was completed, the mighty cultivator finally took action. With the help of many peers, he managed to lure a Gen-in demon into the void. However, both the senior and the demon disappeared. Even if the mighty cultivators of the same generation went to look for them, they did not find any results." Speaking of this, his voice deepened. After the sky demon's body was destroyed by Hu Zhenren once, he could actually recover and return from the void. I suspect that he obtained this item. This treasure can't be kept in a sleeve bag or other things. If I am not wrong, it should be hidden by the sky demon in the 6 cauldrons. Wu Zhenren took a breath and said, "How did senior brother head know about this?" Chu Rui said, "Although Yuan Yang sect has only been established for thousands of years, tracing back to the source, the ancestor of the sect had some friendship with that senior. He happened to be one of the predecessors who refined the treasure. I once read his calligraphy in the pavilion, and at that time I just laughed it off. But thinking about it today, it has its own cause and effect, and this thing should belong to Yuan Yang sect." He said it casually, but in fact, every generation of Yuan Yang sect's leaders had been planning how to find this treasure outside the void. However, because of various obstacles, until now no one had been able to do it. But they did not forget to leave the records of the predecessors, and told the successors. Therefore, when he saw the sky demon returning from the void, he could be so sure. Wu Zhenren said seriously, "If it is as senior brother had said, it is indeed Yuan Yang sect's opportunity, and we really can't let it go." Under the Great Calamity, the Yuan Yang sect's spirit cave was a bit unstable, just like the Taihao sect and the Southern Flower sect. However, because the sect was located in the Eastern Flower sect, it was a place where spirit veins gathered and communicated. Therefore, the situation was slightly better than the other sections. However, it would still be difficult for the sect to have one more spiritual master. But with this treasure, the situation was greatly different. Chu Rui said, "Junior Sister Wu, there are countless talents in Yuan Yang sect, not much worse than the other 3 sections. If we can get this treasure, we can at least have a cave. So this time, Junior Brother Wu, winning or losing is not important. If you can win, it will be good. But if you can't, as long as you can get this treasure, it will be a great contribution to Yuan Yang sect." Wu Zhenren nodded and thought, "I was wondering why senior brother suddenly changed his way of doing things and wanted to kill the demon. So this is the reason." But she still had a question in her mind. Why didn't head senior brother tell Wenguang? Chu Rui shook his head. "Junior brother Wu is a simple-minded person. If we tell him our original intention, he will lose his drive, and we won't be able to hide it from the sections." Wu Zhenren thought about it and agreed, "Head senior brother, don't worry, I won't tell Wenguang." Chu Rui said happily, "Junior sister, you are careful and thoughtful. With you here, I can be at ease. But the sky demon has many tricks. If we really can't find this treasure, we don't have to worry about it. Protecting ourselves is the most important thing. The calamity is coming, the sect needs both of you." Wu Zhenren stood up and bowed. "I understand. It takes a lot of effort to forge the sword of Zhongyue. If head senior brother has nothing else, I will take my leave now." Chu Rui nodded. "Junior sister, feel free to go." After spiritual master Wu returned, he only used half a month's time to refine the sword of Zhongyue. He was worried that if he delayed for too long, things might change. Hence, he went to Chu Rui's place to inform him. Then, together with spiritual master Wu, they rode on the cloud and flew towards the sky. As soon as the two of them moved, the spiritual vigor vibrated. A rainbow light rose from the ground and shone straight up to the sky. With such a huge movement, Zhang Yan, who was in the green sky hall, noticed it immediately. With a glance, it was not difficult to tell that the two of them were going to find trouble with the sky demon. Not only him. The rest of the Zenrens also felt it and looked up to the sky. In the 6 cauldrons of void sky, Sima Quan was giving pointers to a few disciples who came to seek refuge with him just now. Suddenly he felt something and looked down. He laughed coldly and thought to himself, they finally came. I thought it would be Shaoqing and Huanjin who would make the first move. I didn't expect it to be the cultivators of Yuanyang sect. But it's the same. I'll just use all the tricks I have on them first. He waved his sleeves and said, you guys go and cultivate. There are guests down there. I'll go and meet them. The few disciples were bewildered. But since they came here to seek refuge with Sima Quan, there was no way out. They could only retreat to the side hall while trembling. Sima Quan leaped out of the cauldrons and entered the void sky. At the same time, the 6 cauldrons behind him gradually retreated into the depths of the void. This was where his host body was located. He couldn't let anyone destroy it. The 2 rainbow lights flew closer and closer. Not long after, they were within 100 miles. Then, the light dispersed and 2 cultivators, 1 male and 1 female, came out. Wu Jinren came up and bowed to Sima Quan. Jinren Sima, Wu Wenguang greets you. Sima Quan laughed out loud and said, I'm just a demon, I don't deserve to be called a Jinren. Wu Jinren said, even though you are a demon, your cultivation is not weaker than us. To be able to cultivate to this stage, it's your luck. I respect you and I respect the heavens. When Sima Quan heard these words, he retracted his previous arrogance and seriously looked at the other party a few times. He slowly raised his hand and returned the greeting, saying, I don't think you and your wife are here to drink tea as guests, but to take Sima's life. Allow me to properly experience your methods. Wu Jinren said, I'm afraid you've misunderstood. Even though we're here, I'm the only one fighting you. Sima Quan was a little surprised, but he didn't look down on him. Since he dared to challenge him alone, he must have some confidence. So, he didn't say anything more and quickly retreated. In a blink of an eye, he had retreated 1,000 miles. Wu Jinren also retreated to the side. But seeing Sima Quan's speed, he realized that he was stronger than he expected. His expression turned serious and he said, the sky demon can turn invisible. Senior martial brother, you have to be careful when you fight him. Wu Jinren nodded. This time, he came to fight the sky demon, and it could be said that he was fully prepared. He had thought of all the possible scenarios, so of course he would be prepared. Therefore, with a shake of his body, a Dharma idol in the shape of a golden ring suddenly opened up behind him with a rumble. The golden light inside was like a pearl, quietly guarding and unmoving. Outside, countless sword chis circled and whistled back and forth. His Dharma idol stepped in the whirling wind, his clothes fluttering. With a shout, he wrapped the endless sword chis around him and rushed forward. Chapter 1073. Sima Quan saw that Wu Jinren was charging towards him and laughed. He waved his sleeves and transformed into demonic smoke. He floated backwards and did not let Wu Jinren get close. Wu Jinren did not want to let go and chased after him. This chase lasted for half an hour. He saw that Sima Quan did not have the slightest intention to fight, but he was not impatient. He only followed behind him steadily. He had guessed that the sky demon would definitely have something to rely on in the virtual sky, and would most likely use a strategy to exhaust the enemy. With regards to the situation before him, he was already mentally prepared. Moreover, at this time, he absolutely could not have the slightest bit of hesitation or impatience. Otherwise, if the sky demon saw it, it would definitely become worse and repeatedly use this weakness to make a fuss. Therefore, the closer it was to this time, the more he had to show an appearance that was not afraid of the grind. As expected, Sima Quan saw that Wu Jinren was neither too fast nor too slow. He did not get too close and did not chase after him. Sima Quan guessed that Wu Jinren was not afraid of exhausting his energy. If he continued to fight like this, he would suffer great losses. However, he was also fearful. If he were to retreat now, he would have to pay a heavy price. There was no guarantee that no one would come to take advantage of him. Therefore, after a while, he stopped retreating. Instead, he stopped and turned around. He waved his sleeves and released 1,000 miles of demonic smoke that rolled towards Wu Jinren. At this level of battle, because the distance between the two of them was far apart, a single attack would not hurt the opponent. Even if the attack reached the opponent, it would take some time. By then, the opponent would not be able to dodge and would be able to find a suitable method to deal with the attack. Therefore, the only way to win was through momentum. It was normal for the mana to fluctuate for thousands of miles. Wu Zhenren was also cautious. He knew that he did not have enough experience in battles. Therefore, he did not advance rashly and was prepared. Only by not giving the other party an opportunity could one be considered to have defeated the other party. Seeing the other party make a move, Zhang Xian also responded accordingly. He circulated his mana outside of the golden ring. In an instant, the sword aura exploded like a waterfall and clashed with the demonic smoke. This battle was silent. The demonic smoke was good at contaminating mana and treasures. However, the sword aura was split into many strands. It seemed to be broken and continued. Before it could be contaminated, it would be killed first. Therefore, even though the demonic smoke was gradually devouring the sword light, it would disperse a little every time it moved forward. In the last few kilometers, it was already faint to the point of being unable to pose a threat at all. Wu Zhenren saw that the flames were getting weaker and flicked his sleeves, creating a strong wind that swept away the ashes, leaving only an empty space in front of him. Sima Quan saw this and thought, this person has a deep foundation. He acted cautiously, and it would be difficult to shake him in a head-on battle. It would be better to use the soul invasion method to test him. Let's see how he defends. When he was in the Dongsheng continent, he had suppressed at least 2 Taoist grotto heavens with the art of soul invasion. Later, if Huoxian hadn't used his body to attract the heavenly yang qi and the pure yang fire to refine him, he wouldn't have lost so completely. With a thought, he split out a clone. It transformed into a formless aura and charged forward. Suddenly, Martial Master Wu felt a gust of cold wind. However, it was as if he didn't sense it and didn't dodge. He allowed it to invade his body. When the clone entered his consciousness, it saw that he was sitting on a shining sword board. It was about to rush up and devour his soul. Just now, when it moved, a long sword-shaped golden light shot down from the top of its head and slashed its body. With a cry, it was killed. Sima Quan, who was outside, suddenly felt that the clone that invaded his body was destroyed. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He thought about it and felt that there must be some kind of weapon hidden in Wu Zhenren's body that could restrain his soul invasion method. However, his clone was destroyed in an instant and he couldn't even see what it was. This made him very cautious. Since Martial Master Wu was here to subdue the demon, he had done some research on the Sky Demon's methods. He had already cultivated a sword ray of the De Yuan Jingxin sword in his body. This was the Yuan Yang sex killing weapon. The so-called righteous heart had the effect of restraining evil and killing the inner demon. Sima Quan didn't know what was going on and of course, he was at a disadvantage. He had defeated Wu Zhenren and knew that it was time for him to counterattack. Hence, he waved his hand and the sword ray beside him moved. Tens of thousands of white rays spread out for thousands of miles and rushed out. Sima Quan didn't want to take it head-on. He turned his body and disappeared, intending to avoid it. Martial Master Wu's eyes lit up and said, "Senior Martial Brother, why don't you use the One Origin sword to force him to show himself? This way, you might be able to injure the demon severely." Martial Master Wu thought about it seriously but shook his head. Chu Rui had warned him that using the One Origin sword of Zhongyue would require a lot of mana. Hence, he had to use it carefully. He was prepared to use it as a killing move. Now that he had fought a few rounds, he still didn't know what his opponent's methods were like. Hence, it wasn't the right time to use this magical weapon. However, he would not miss this opportunity to test the waters. He extended his finger and the golden bead within the golden ring Dharma idol moved and shot out like lightning. It traveled 100 miles and exploded with a loud bang. In an instant, the light was like a wheel and the intense golden energy dispersed like a blazing sun. The cultivation technique he cultivated was called the Golden Dynasty Baleful Swordplay, and he'd refined a strand of blazing flames of the heavens within it. It was similar to the technique Huoxian used all those years ago, and it was extremely capable of countering devils. However, this technique stressed upon cultivating a strand of pure yang sword qi, so when it was released, it would be even more incisive. It was not difficult for Sima Quan's shapeless body to avoid the sword qi. However, under the clash of the pure yang sword qi, he could not withstand it. However, he had suffered a loss due to this technique before. Now that he dared to use it without fear, it was because he already had a way to counter it. He first released demonic smoke to block the sword qi from the outside world. Then, he took out a treasured mirror. This mirror was extremely strange. The surface of the mirror was pitch black and did not emit a single bit of light. With the activation of his magic power, all the pure yang sword qi in the area seemed to be attracted and were all thrown into the mirror. In just a few breaths, he had absorbed all of them. He then waved his sleeve and put it away. Just now, seeing that Martial Master Wu didn't accept his opinion, Martial Master Wu wasn't angry. Although he said that the onlooker could see clearly, the enemy had his own considerations. Now that he saw that Sima Quan was able to escape with just a flip of his hand, he couldn't help but sigh to himself. Since Sima Quan had blocked this round of attack, he had to return the favor. With a flick of his hand, a white lotus flew out and floated in the air. Not long after, it arrived in front of the golden ring. With a light sway, it actually dodged the sword qi like a shadow and easily broke into the inner circle. Martial Master Wu's face turned serious. He didn't recognize this treasure, but it wasn't hard for him to recognize the filthy qi within it. This time, he didn't do anything. Like last time, he didn't defend himself. After all, the sword qi of righteousness was only a ray of sword qi and it had its limits. Although he was able to kill a part of his soul, he might not be able to defend against this kind of filthy treasure. Moreover, with his own body as the battlefield, even if he won, there would be repercussions. Therefore, he took out a sword technique. Flames rose from the pool of golden light beneath his feet and descended a few inches. Then, an invisible sword barrier appeared around his body. Zhuodalian was originally heading straight for his body. However, when it came into contact with the sword barrier, it suddenly trembled. It was sent flying by a huge force. It turned around, as if it was trying to break in from another direction. However, after trying for a while, it realized that it didn't matter which direction it went from. It was protected by the opponent and there wasn't a single gap for it to pass through. Sima Quan saw that the treasure couldn't penetrate, but he didn't put it away. Instead, he allowed it to linger around. This was like a sword hanging over one's head, restricting the opponent and not allowing him to move freely. Martial Master Wu was a Xianmen cultivator and hated filthy things like this. Therefore, he immediately sent a few rays of golden light up to chase it away. However, the treasure seemed to be flying very slowly. Once it saw a threatening item flying up, it would dodge quickly and he couldn't deal with it in a short period of time. Sima Quan saw that he was distracted and his eyes flashed. Suddenly, his body turned into a rainbow and shot forward. The sword qi around the golden ring danced naturally and tried to mince him into pieces. However, after a few attempts, he already knew the situation here. Suddenly, it became invisible and easily passed through the sword qi ring and broke in. Just now, he couldn't hurt the opponent. Now that he had personally entered, he didn't believe that the opponent would be able to resist. Martial Master Wu saw that he was coming over, but he didn't panic. His expression was calm and he raised both of his hands. 2 rays of golden light flew out from his sleeves and circled in the air. They turned into chains that hung down and blocked the incoming evil wind. It actually forced Sima Quan to retreat from the shapeless transformation. This item was known as the Golden Dash Rainbow Chain. It was refined using lightning and fire and was then sent to the Inara Temple to reduce its magical power. It could even bind in demons. However, the demonic qi also had the ability to pollute. Therefore, it could only be delayed for a moment. Sima Quan's body was forced to reveal itself and he knew that it wasn't good. Seeing that the chain was about to wrap around his body, he immediately tried to escape. However, when he tried to use his magical power, he realized that it was useless. He also made a prompt decision. His hand was like a knife and he cut himself in half, leaving only the lower half of his body in the chain. The upper half of his body was wrapped in demonic chi as he retreated from the range of the rainbow chain. Martial Master Wu didn't dare to chase after him. He took out the thunder dust sword and shook it slightly. The sword suddenly turned into dust and entered the half of the demon's body. He then made a hand sign and lightning flashed everywhere, causing it to explode. He then pointed with his finger and the golden yang qi under his feet swept forward, sweeping away the remaining demonic qi. He wasn't greedy, he just wanted to kill as many as he could. As long as he could gain the upper hand and accumulate, he would win. Sima Quan's face immediately darkened. It wasn't that he didn't have any tricks up his sleeves, but Martial Master Wu was watching from the side. He said that it wouldn't be 2 against 1, but how could he believe that? That was why he had to divert some of his energy to be on guard. This caused him to be worried about using many of his killing techniques. When Wu Zhenren fought, he followed the rules. Although there was nothing special about him, he did not overlook any flaws. But it was like this, which made him feel like he did not know where to start. If this goes on, unless one side suddenly revealed a flaw or used a special technique to win, if not, he could only wear it down for a long time. Both sides fought back and forth for more than 4 hours. Sima Quan first felt that he couldn't go on like this. He thought for a while and decided to come up with a plan. His body shook and suddenly split into 2, one on the left and one on the right, flying in different directions. Martial Master Wu was startled. He wasn't good at adapting to situations. The 2 Sima Quan looked the same, but he didn't know which one to chase. Martial Master Wu then said, "Senior, one of them must be Sima Quan's real body. You can chase after him. If you can kill him, I don't believe that his cultivation won't be damaged. I can keep an eye on the other one." Sect leader Senior didn't order me to attack, but he didn't say that I can't chase after the demon. Martial Master Wu wasn't a pedantic person. When he heard this, he felt that it was feasible. He immediately turned around and chased after the demon on the left. Naturally, Martial Master Wu chased after the demon on the right. However, before that, she made a hand sign and secretly left behind a shadow. It attached itself to a thin piece of glass jade and flew towards the 6 cauldrons in the sky. Just now that Sima Quan was nearby, she was afraid that her tricks would be discovered. Therefore, she didn't make a move. Now that the opportunity presented itself, it was the perfect time to act. With her full strength, the thin piece of glass jade caught up to the 6 cauldrons in a short while. Because she didn't know which cauldron Sima Quan would hide the magical treasure in, she could only search for the one closest to the cauldron. Fortunately, there were no restrictions on the outside of the cauldron, so she was able to enter smoothly. Once inside, she sensed that there was a place with weak spiritual vigor. She also saw a few disciples of the heavenly palace of mysterious Een cultivating there. The cauldron was spacious. If there were no accidents, the 2 of them would not be able to meet face to face. However, to prevent alerting Sima Quan, she used a hand sign to make herself invisible and headed towards the place where the spiritual vigor was. Not long after, she arrived in front of a bronze pavilion. She discovered that there was a deep well here, and the spiritual vigor was emitted from the well. She examined it and did not find any restrictions. Thus, she waved her hand and an item flew up from below. She immediately grabbed it in her hand. She looked at it and found that it was a bronze box. When it was slightly opened, a sliver of spiritual vigor leaked out. Although it was only a little, it was unusually refreshing. Just by breathing, it was like drinking a mouthful of celestial dew. Her entire body felt refreshed and comfortable, as if she had returned to her own cave. She thought to herself, could this be the item that sect leader Senior Brother was talking about? However, there was a doubt in her heart. How could Sima Quan let her take such an important item so easily? But the abundant spiritual vigor inside could not be faked. After pondering for a moment, she decided to keep it. However, she discovered that this item could not be hidden in the fragrance pouch. This was in line with what sect leader had said earlier, so she could only keep it with her for the time being. She leaped out of the palace cauldron and was about to search the remaining palaces. However, at this moment, she saw a few ferocious devils flying out of the cauldron. They flew everywhere as if they were looking for something. She guessed that after her family had taken the magical treasure, the devils guarding the place felt that something was wrong and came out to search for it. After thinking for a while, she was afraid that she would reveal any flaws, so she gave up on her original idea and flew back to where she came from. At this moment, in another place, Sage Wu had chased after Sima Quan for tens of thousands of miles. However, the latter suddenly stopped, turned around and sneered, "Could it be that Sage Wu also wants to exchange blows with me? That's good too. I was originally prepared to experience the abilities of you and your wife." Sage Wu also stopped and said with a smile, "This time it's my husband and fellow cultivator who are sparring. I don't have such thoughts." Sima Quan laughed and said, "If that's the case, then I won't accompany you." After saying this, he turned his body and disappeared from where he stood. Sage Wu could not help but be startled and said, "This must be the phase reversal technique of the Nether Spring sect. This devil was afraid that it would be difficult for me and my wife to use their techniques together, so he purposely used a scheme to lure me away. It's too late to chase after him now. I wonder if senior brother can pass this trial." Chapter 1074. Once Sima Quan used the phase reversal technique, the two of them merged into one. Then he turned around and looked at Wu Jinren's figure. He knew that Si Wu Jinren would arrive soon, so he had to use all his techniques in this short period of time to severely injure or kill Wu Jinren. This way, even if he had to face another person, he would not have to worry. Although this Wu Wenguang's defense is tight, I have already tested many of his techniques. On the outside, there is the sword chi barrier. In the middle, there is the rainbow chain. Finally, there is the golden pill's evil chi. Both the rainbow chain and the golden pill can counter my shapeless transformation, but it is not impossible. He cast a spell, and countless devils flew out from behind him. Not long after, they filled the sky. Then his body shook, and in an instant, tens of thousands of devil avatars appeared. Some were real, and some were real. He called out, and the countless devils worked together to rush forward. Seeing this shocking scene, Wu Jinren's expression changed slightly. However, his cultivation level was high and he quickly calmed down. It was not difficult to see that Sima Quan was attacking with all his strength. If he made a mistake, he would be defeated. Therefore, he did not hesitate to use his mana. With a shout, the golden rings suddenly grew bigger. The swords inside flew up and like a storm, they spun and flew along the boundary of 1,000 miles. When the sky demon avatars rushed over, they suddenly split into two. The front did not stop for a moment. Once they rushed in front of the sword wall, they all became shapeless and broke into the inner circle. The demons at the back were not as lucky. Most of them were split apart by the sword chi. However, because they were formed by the yin chi, they were also contaminated by the sword chi. As the two clashed, the originally tight and stable sword wall also suffered a lot of damage. In just a few breaths of time, it had actually become much thinner. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the second half of the heavenly demon avatar swept the remaining demons and surged in. Seeing that they were coming at him fiercely, Wu Jinren immediately threw out 2 long rainbows from his sleeves. It was the golden rainbow chain. But because this magic treasure was only a profound level weapon, it could only cover an area of 7 to 8 miles. Facing the numerous demonic creatures that covered an area of more than 1,000 miles, it was powerless. It could only surround a small portion of them first. Then, he flicked his sleeves and released hundreds of lightning bolts. He wanted to use all his strength to clean up this area before dealing with other areas. However, just now Sima Quan did not know what was going on, which was why he was trapped by the magical treasure. Now that he was prepared, he would not repeat the same mistake. He saw the sky demon doppelgangers that were surrounded by the chains suddenly disappear one by one. They had used the phase reversal technique and moved to other places. Wu Jinren hurriedly used the rainbow chain to chase, but Sima Quan relied on the phase reversal technique to become a sky demon. This technique had naturally reached the stage where he could change according to his heart's desire. The demons separated and merged, dodged and evaded, gathered and dispersed unpredictably. The rainbow chain was like a net catching water, There were loopholes everywhere. During this short period of time, the countless devilish beings had already made it halfway to his body, and it wouldn't take long for them to reach him. The sky demon Qi. Quan Quan Qi Wu Wu Zhens of God Wu Wu Quan, the Zhens Wu Qi, Sun, the Zheng and Wuz. After a few breaths, the rainbow chains flashed. Dozens of sky demon avatars were forced out by the demonic power of the chains. Seeing the opportunity, Martial Master Wu raised the thunder sword to the sky and pointed with his finger. The thunder sword turned into dust and fell to the ground. As soon as the dust landed on the ground, the thunder sword swept through the area. However, compared to the large number of demons, the thunder sword was like trying to put out a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. He felt a little powerless and could only use all his mana to defend. At this moment, within a radius of thousands of miles, there were sword lights leaping and flashing, entangling with the heavenly demon avatars. Rainbow lights tumbled as if they were boiling. Every moment, there would be a demon being cut down by the sword. However, there seemed to be no end to them. As for the heavenly demon avatars, they constantly used the phase reversal technique to move forward. Often, when one charged at the front, with a turn of their magic power, thousands of them would follow. The speed of their advance could be said to be incomparably fast. Seeing that Wu Zhenren Wu could not hold on any longer, Wu Zhenren Wu's expression turned serious. He raised his hand and was about to take out the first Yuan sword. But he hesitated and did not move. He thought to himself, Sima Quan has not used all his skills. With my mana, even if I use the first Yuan sword, I can only suppress 60% of the avatars. I can't do anything to the rest. Once I use up all my mana, I won't be able to fight anymore. My life might be in danger. I can still hold on. Why don't I stall for a little longer and see how he is? If he can't hold on any longer, I can use it then. Thinking about this, he raised his sleeves. Between his fingers, dozens of golden pearls appeared. He then pushed them forward. At the same time, the golden pond under his feet sank by a foot. The bottom of the pond could be seen. Hidden within the pond was the golden sword of death that he had accumulated through pure yang fire. If he used up all of it, other than the rainbow-splitting chain, he would not be able to suppress the sky demon's shapeless transformation. But at this moment he could only use this qi to suppress the thousands of demon avatars. The first golden bead flew out and landed in the midst of the devils. It exploded with a loud bang, and the golden light was like a scorching sun. It was just one bead, but it affected a radius of 100 miles. Apart from the dozens of heavenly devil avatars that managed to escape, the rest were all reduced to ashes under the illumination of the light. If all the golden pearls fell, it wouldn't be difficult to wipe out all the devilish filth here. But right at this moment, a loud laugh sounded from within the formation, and then a mirror that was pitch black like ink flew out. With a flash, it absorbed all the golden pearls. Martial Master Wu was shocked. He did not expect the mirror to be so powerful. He did not have many tricks up his sleeves. He could only defend the inner circle. But doing so would mean giving up the initiative. The rainbow-splitting chain, under the corrosion of the countless demons, finally broke. Sima Quan had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Without hesitation, a gust of cold wind rushed into the space between Martial Sage Wu's eyebrows. Just as he was about to enter his consciousness, a golden light flashed above his head and a sword ray fell down. Before it could hit its target, a white lotus flew over and blocked it. He chuckled and immediately activated the phase reversal technique. He was waiting for the thousands of avatars to come over. Then he would be able to suppress his opponent and win this battle. However, just as he was about to do so, he realized that the ray of sword light above him was shaking. He could not use this technique. His face darkened. Because of this, he could only wait for the avatars to rush in one by one. Luckily, in the blink of an eye, there were thousands of avatars coming in to regroup with him. He knew that he had an endless supply of energy, so he did not wait any longer. With a leap, he dashed towards where Martial Master Wu's soul was. Martial Master Wu knew that this was a crucial moment. If he waited for all of Sima Quan's avatars to regroup, he would have the absolute advantage in destroying Martial Master Wu's soul. Therefore, without hesitation, he shouted and took out the first origin sword of Yu. When the sword was in midair, it transformed into a heavy black long sword. The body of the sword trembled slightly and the air shook. The ray of light from the sword spread out for 3,000 miles. Then, no matter if it was the demons or the demonic avatars, they were all pulled by a boundless force and gathered on the sword. Sima Quan realized what was happening outside and turned pale with fright. This action was equivalent to cutting off his backup. He could only rely on his current strength to deal with Martial Master Wu. Even though he still had the advantage in the Battle of Souls, and if he persisted, there was a high chance that he could kill his opponent. However, if he were to sever the mortal heart, it would take at least a few hours for him to have a result. One should know that there was more than one person from the Yuanyang sect. By that time, Martial Master Wu would have already arrived. If the two of them worked together, not only would he not be able to suppress his opponent, he might even die here. Thinking about this, he made up his mind. With a wave of his hand, he kept Swadalian and retreated from Martial Master Wu's ocean of consciousness. Once he was outside, he took out the black mirror and shone it at the first origin sword of Yu. The thousands of avatars were sucked out of the mirror. Then, in a flash, he retreated outside of the golden rings and said, "Martial Master Wu, let's call it a day. I am not going to keep you company." Wu Zhenren heaved a sigh of relief and bowed his head. "If we continue to fight, I will definitely lose. You have won this round." Sima Quan grunted and said, "Winning or losing doesn't matter to me. Since I can't kill you, I won't beat you." He glanced to the side and saw a ray of clear light flying towards him. He couldn't help but feel lucky. He turned around and turned into a cloud of black smoke and flew away. The clear light arrived in front of him and Martial Master Wu came out. Seeing that Martial Master Wu was safe and sound, he heaved a sigh of relief. He walked to Martial Master Wu's side and asked with concern, "Senior, are you hurt?" Martial Master Wu shook his head and sighed, "I have failed the sect leader's request. I do not have the strength to make this demon stay." Martial Master Wu smiled and said, "If Senior can return safely, the sect leader will be really happy." After the two of them exchanged a few words, they did not want to stay in the sky any longer. They held each other's hands and flew towards the East Flower Continent. In the Green Sky Hall, Zhang Yan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He had been paying attention to the battle from the beginning to the end. He saw the entire process of the battle clearly. Even when Venerable Wu secretly sent his doppelganger to search for the pure Yuan stone, he did not miss his eyes. He saw that although Martial Master Wu did not win against Sima Quan, Martial Master Wu did not look depressed at all. Instead, he looked relaxed and happy. He could not help but guess that the Yuanyang sect was not as simple as it looked. Just as he was thinking, after the Wu couple turned into a beam of clear light and fled to Donghua, he sensed that a formless sword energy had also disappeared. The sword qi was extremely strong and it protected the two of them along the way. He guessed that it was the Yuanyang sect leader's doing. He could not help but think, even the Yuanyang sect leader was alarmed. This is not a small matter. It seems that the Yuanyang sect's mission of killing the demon is fake. They must be here to look for something. He raised his head and looked at the 6 cauldrons in the sky. His eyes showed that he was deep in thought. Martial Master Wu and Martial Master Wu descended from the 9th heaven and quickly returned to Mingbai Mountain. They came to the front of Zhengxin Hall. After the boy reported them, they were called in together. When they arrived at the palace, Wu Zhenren bowed with his hands folded in front of his chest. He had a look of shame on his face. "Sect leader, I did not win this time. It was a disgrace to Yuanyang. Please punish me." Chu Rui smiled and waved his hand. "Junior brother, don't blame yourself. It's good that you came back safely. Moreover, you did well this time. Why would I blame you?" Martial Master Wu was stunned. Martial Master Wu came up and told him the whole story. He said, "Sect leader senior was afraid that you would not be able to act well after knowing the truth. That's why he told me to hide it from you." Martial Master Wu finally understood. He asked anxiously, "Junior sister, did you find the pure Yuan stone?" Martial Master Wu took out a bronze box from his sleeve and said, Sect leader senior, I did find something in the Cauldron Palace. It's just that my knowledge is shallow. I don't know if it's what you're looking for. Chu Rui took over the copper box and opened it. Immediately, a gust of spiritual chi flowed out. He raised his palm and touched it gently. The spiritual vigor immediately disappeared, as though it was suppressed. He stood at the same spot and looked at it for a while, but he did not say a word. Martial Master Wu was perturbed and said, Sect leader senior, did I make a mistake? Chu Rui shook his head. Junior sister, you did not find it wrong. This is the pure Yuan stone. However, it is not the complete one. It is only one of them. Martial Master Wu was shocked. Could it be that there are many more of these stones? Chu Rui said, when the senior was refining this treasure, he invited many people of the same generation to help him. Hence, it was originally meant to be shared among several people. After it was refined, it could be divided and combined. At most, it could be divided into 8 pieces. However, the senior disappeared outside the virtual sky. He did not fulfill his promise. That's why the later generations could not forget about it. Now, it seems that the senior did not divide it himself, or someone else did it for him. Martial Master Wu said regretfully, if that's the case, there should be a few more pure Yuan stones in the other cauldrons. If I could search for a while longer, wouldn't I get a few more? Chu Rui smiled. Our Yuan Yang sect is already satisfied to have one. This is also the benefit of the predecessor. Why should we be greedy? Martial Master Wu nodded. Since the founder of the Yuan Yang sect was the one who helped to refine this treasure, it could be said that he had gotten his own treasure back. Chu Rui kept the primordial essence stone and said, with this stone and my primordial Yang treasure, Xuanji Yang Wall, I can ensure the safety of the spirit cave for 400 to 500 years. My righteous martial nephew will also have hope to enter the grotto heaven. Martial Master Wu said, 400 to 500 years? After that, Chu Rui's expression did not change. He said, under the catastrophe, no one in the world can escape. How can our Yuan Yang sect avoid it? Martial Master Wu's heart trembled. She had already understood the meaning of her sect leader's words. When the catastrophe comes, some of them will not be able to escape. It was meaningless to worry about the safety of the spirit cave. Just until now, Martial Master Wu had not said anything. Now, he said, Senior brother sect leader, I have a question. Since the pure Yuan stone is so important, why didn't Sima Quan take care of it carefully? Chu Rui smiled faintly and said, this is not surprising. This devil is a Yin devil and needs to rely on the Yin Qi to survive. The spiritual objects formed by the clear spirit Qi are useless to him. They are just decorations. Martial Master Wu sighed, I don't know which family will benefit the remaining pure Yuan stones. Chu Rui flicked his sleeves and said, don't bother about other people's business. Since I've retrieved this item, I can start the ritual tomorrow and use it to nourish the spirit acupoints. I hope that within 100 years, Yuan Yang will have another grotto heaven guarding the mountain gate. Chapter 1075. Sima Quan left the Wu couple and headed back to where the 6 cauldrons were. However, when he reached the palace gate, he saw many demons flying around one of the cauldrons. He didn't find it strange. Hence, he casually grabbed a demon and pressed it into his chest. This demon was originally the manifestation of the demonic aura on his body. Once it returned to his body, everything he saw and felt immediately appeared in front of him. It was as if he had experienced it himself. Hence, he knew immediately that this was because of the sudden change of spiritual vigor in the palace, which alarmed these demons. He thought for a while and walked to the back of the palace. He arrived in front of a bronze pavilion. Looking down, it was empty. The jade stone that was originally placed there was nowhere to be seen. He thought to himself, this is definitely not the work of a disciple of the palace. Just now, other than the people from Yuan Yang sect, no one else has come here. They must have taken it away when I was not on guard. That treasure contained pure spiritual qi. I originally thought it was just a pill jade, but now it seems like it's not that simple. Other than the cauldron that he destroyed, there was one left in each of the cauldrons. He didn't think much of it before, but after this incident, he had to take it seriously. However, he couldn't make up his mind on how to make use of it. After thinking for a while, he decided to recover the Fa that he had lost in the battle. He turned around and sat down in the inner palace. He took out a spell and a stone door fell down from above, closing the room. He rummaged around in his sleeves and took out a pair of shiny black sunglasses, but the color was a little lighter than before. He flipped the mirror around and waved it with its back facing him. In an instant, there was a whistling sound as thousands of doppelgangers rushed out and merged with him one by one. After the demon chi recovered, he turned the mirror around. He shook it a little and golden beads appeared. He continued to refine it. The golden beads gradually dimmed and turned into strands of golden chi that floated out of the mirror. After a long time, the surface of the mirror returned to its original pitch-black state. This magical treasure could take in the elements of thunder, fire, wind, and water, and even the poison, fire, and gale. However, after it was full, the surface of the mirror would turn from black to white. At that time, it would reach its limit and would not be able to hold any more external chi. It would need to use its own power to refine it. Because this move consumed a lot of magic power, he would only use this treasure in a battle, but he would not normally take it out. After putting it away, he took out a pigeon egg-sized black bead and tossed it up, causing it to hover half a foot above his head. With a thought, a streak of gray energy shone down from the bead. It trapped him inside. Who knew that on the way back, Nanhua had already expelled him for violating the sex rules. At that time, he was still not satisfied and sent a few letters to Feng Chungchang and the others. Who knew that all of them were like stones thrown into the sea, and there was no reply. Not only that, but because of this, he exposed himself and attracted many Nanhua disciples to come out and capture him. He had many good things with him that Huang Yugong had given him, especially the green phoenix egg. Once it was cultivated, it would have the ability to fight against Yuanying cultivators, so it attracted many covetous eyes from his original sect. For more than 2 years, he had to hide here and there. He had joined a few small sects, but every time, he would be found by Nanhua disciples, so he could only hide in the deep mountains. However, even though he was talented and had superior skills, he couldn't get external medicine out of thin air. Originally, he could improve by leaps and bounds because of the sect's support. Now, he had to rely on himself, so his improvement was very slow. In these 2 years, other than a slight increase in his magic power, his cultivation didn't improve much. If this continued, he would definitely be left far behind by his fellow sect members who he had looked down on. He was unwilling to accept this, and he had had enough of hiding everywhere. Thus, after careful consideration, he decided to go to the heavenly palace of Mystic Een to seek shelter. However, in the beginning, Sima Quan wanted to win people's hearts, so he personally used his magic power to bring everyone to heaven. Later, when there were more sects, this matter was handed over to the disciples who had entered first, and he no longer asked about it. If the Donghua cultivators wanted to go to the heavenly palace, they had to chant Sima Quan's honorific name. However, if they went to the Little Devil Cave to receive a demon into their body, it would guide them to where they should go and wait. If they had any strange thoughts along the way, the demon would naturally eat away their souls. However, these places were mostly guarded and suppressed by the Taoist sect disciples, so it was not easy to find them. Fang Xin and the demon used the remaining spirit shells he had on him to buy them from a wandering cultivator of the demon sect. Only then did he avoid a lot of trouble. After traveling in the sky for 3 days, he saw a dense forest island on the ocean. He sensed that his opportunity had landed here, so he descended from the sky. Halfway there, he was in a daze. It turned out that he had passed through a layer of illusions. When he put away the sparrowhawk and landed on the ground, he realized that he was in a kernel. On the ground, there was a platform made of bricks. There were 4 stone pillars at the 4 corners, and there were 36 mats on the platform. They were quite far apart, and there were already more than 10 people sitting there. Everyone's gazes shifted over, and the few people nearby all greeted him. He cupped his hands as a greeting and went up to occupy a mat. Like the others, he didn't speak, just meditating and adjusting his breathing. After waiting for a day, many more people came one after another until all the seats were filled. Suddenly, the 4 stone pillars shook, and a layer of black smoke wrapped around them and charged into the sky. Everyone waited for a few hours before they saw a flying boat break through the clouds and fly down. When it reached the sky above the island, a Taoist with long hair appeared. He looked down and said, "Those who want to enter the Heaven Palace can come on my boat. You can come on my sky boat. If you regret it, you can leave. But what happened today cannot be spread. If not, the demon in your body will take your life." None of the people below retreated, and all of them leaped up. They all headed towards the boat. After everyone landed on the boat, the Taoist with long hair tossed down many talismans and said, "My name is Lu, and do keep these talismans well. If not, don't blame me for not being able to enter the Heaven Palace." No one dared to be careless, and they all carefully took them into their hands. Lu and Du said, "This trip to the Heaven Palace is different from when we came. It will take 3 days. If you don't understand anything, you can come and ask me." As he said that, he turned around and entered the cabin. When everyone saw him leave, they all relaxed. Now that they were all from the same sect, they all greeted each other. Fang Xin and walked to the side of the boat alone and looked at the surging seawater below. Mount Donghua was getting further and further away from his home. He couldn't help but feel a little dazed, but his heart was unprecedentedly relaxed. At this moment, a cultivator walked to Fang Xinan's side and cupped his hands, saying, "I am Chu Liangong, a disciple of the Eastern Seas Duchen sect. Because I had no hope of making a name for myself in the sect and was ostracized by my fellow disciples, I came to try my luck beyond the heavens. Looking at this Taoist brother's aura, I guess you are also cultivating under Taoist Shenmen. May I know how I should address you?" Fang Xin was very careful. He gave a fake name of Fang Hui and didn't say anything else. The person didn't ask about his background and only said, "Taoist brother Fang, I heard that the battles in the Heaven Palace are fierce. Since the 36 of us went to the Heaven Palace together, we are in the same boat. From now on, we can only protect each other." Fang Xinan agreed with this point. In the past, he had been too arrogant and had offended people everywhere. In the end, there was no one in the sect who would speak up for him. Instead, most of them came to kick him when he was down. Since he had joined the extraterrestrial demon palace, he could only rely on his fellow sect members. At this moment, another person came forward. He also seemed to be from Taoist Shenmen. He bowed to the two and said excitedly, "Rumor has it that there is a technique that leads directly to the great Tao in the Heaven Palace of Mystical Yin. If you cultivate the technique of the Heaven Palace of Mystical Yin, it doesn't matter which sect you cultivated before, or if your talent is good or not. I have been longing for the technique of immortality all my life, but I couldn't get it. In order to get a glimpse of the great Tao, I am willing to become a demon." Fang Xinan's mouth twitched. He didn't think much of the so-called divine techniques in the Heaven Palace of Mystical Yin. The Nanhua technique was a superior technique of Taoist Shenmen. Huang Yugong had passed down the secret technique of the sect. He was confident that with his talent, as long as he didn't lack external medicine, he could practice it step by step. He didn't dare to think about the cave, but Yuanying was not an extravagant hope. The reason why he joined the demon palace was to find a place to cultivate that could protect him. It was also convenient to find external medicine. As long as he could cultivate Yuanying, he wouldn't be afraid of people looking for trouble. He could even be like Tao Zhenhong and establish his own sect overseas. The heaven ship kept moving forward. After half a day, it broke through the clouds in the 9 heavens. In another 2 days, it would reach the palace cauldron. At this time, a gust of black smoke spewed out from the palace. In an instant, it spread over everyone and wrapped them up. Fang Xin felt the talisman on his body tremble slightly, as if it was protecting him. He knew that Lu Andu's words were true, so he tightened his grip on it. After a while, when the black smoke dissipated, they looked around and found that they were standing in a large hall. On the high platform in front of them, there was a Taoist with a cold expression and pale skin. Lu Andu turned around and said in a low voice, That is third senior brother Yu Shao. I heard that there are two senior sisters up there, but I have never seen them in the palace. In private, you can call him eldest senior brother to avoid offending him." After giving his instructions, he led everyone forward and bowed. After Yu Shao accepted everyone's bow, he waved his hand and put away all the demons that everyone had inserted into their bodies. He said in a clear voice, "Since you've entered the heavenly palace, you're all from the same sect. There's no need to use this." Everyone was overjoyed and thanked him profusely. Although they volunteered to join the Devil Palace, after all, no one wanted a demon to occupy their body all day long. Yu Shao said proudly, "I have a divine talisman bestowed by the palace master. Those who need it can take it. After refining it, you can use it to refine demons and insects. One can be used to fight against enemies, and the other can be used to absorb spiritual opportunity. If you're not willing, it's fine. However, you have to return to Donghua once a month to collect external medicine and precious materials from the lower sections." Sima Quan's 6 demon insects did not harm the disciples of the 6 major demon sects much, but they were not so polite to the smaller sections. Every month, they had to force them to hand over their offerings. Those sects had no choice but to submit. Fortunately, he did not ask for much, so they could endure it. When Fang Xin heard this, he immediately decided to accept this task. Although he would have to run back and forth, it would also prevent the Devil Talisman from entering his body. Even though he knew that the Devil Palace had other ways to control him, it was better than dealing with them all day long. At this moment, in the Azure Sky Hall, Zhang Yan sat on a cattail hassock. His eyes flickered as he watched the sky ship fly into the palace cauldron just now. Ever since he saw Wu Zhenren and Sima Quan fight, he had not been idle for the past 2 years. Instead, he had been deducing a demon-subduing divine art. Just now, he had succeeded a month ago. After testing it for dozens of days, he could already use it freely. He looked out into the void and used his mana to suppress the throbbing of the demon-subduing bamboo. He thought to himself, "I originally planned to complete this technique in 3 years before looking for Sima Quan. However, now that it's completed in 2 years, there's no need to wait any longer. The arrangements in the South Sea have already taken up a lot of time. After reporting to the sect master, I can go and settle this matter." Chapter 1076. Sima Quan hid in the depths of the cauldron, black smoke drifting around his body. He was using the phase reversal technique to absorb spiritual opportunity. He also knew that although things were still peaceful now, if the situation continued to develop, there would always be people from the various sects and grotto heavens of the Donghua continent who could not take it anymore would come looking for him. Sooner or later, there would be a fierce battle. If he could make it through, he would be able to reign supreme in the outer world. If he couldn't, he would have to start all over again. That was why he didn't dare to relax. He was constantly thinking of ways to increase his strength. After meditating for several hours, he finally stopped and said, "Who's waiting outside?" A voice came from outside the door. "Teacher, disciple Yu Shao requests an audience." Sima Quan made a hand seal, and the stone door in front of the palace opened with a rumble. A pale-faced middle-aged cultivator walked in, bowed, and said, "Teacher, this month, the 36 disciples have been received into the palace." With that said, he shook his sleeve and released the devils that he had captured from the bodies of his disciples. Sima Quan sat motionlessly as the demons burrowed into his body, quickly disappearing. After the demons stayed in the bodies of the disciples, they would secretly absorb a strand of their heart blood. As long as they had any ill intentions, he would immediately sense it. After a few breaths, he finished circulating and said, "Yu Shao, you did well." Yu Shao hurriedly bowed his head and said, "It is a disciple's duty to serve master." Sima Quan said, "Is there anyone who is willing to go to Donghua to collect the offerings?" Yu Shao replied, "Just now, there's only one person." Sima Quan said, "Did you tell him about the dangers within?" When the disciples of Profound in Heavenly Palace went to collect the offerings, they had to travel back and forth between Void Sky and East Flower every month. Because of this, there was a high chance that they would be discovered by the cultivators of the profound and demon clans. Up until now, more than 10 disciples had died on this mission. They would also try all sorts of excuses, unwilling to go again. However, the mysterious In Sky Palace was afraid that there were not enough disciples who could control the 6 In demon insects. Regarding this matter, he did not force it. There were several times when Sima Quan made use of the heavenly demon doppelganger. That was how he was able to send precious materials and medicines to the heavenly palace. Yu Xiao bowed and said, "I've already made things clear with him." However, even though he knows this, he didn't refuse and is still willing to go. Sima Quan said, "Oh, this is interesting. Where did this disciple come from?" Yu Xiao said, "This disciple calls himself Feng Hui, but this disciple has already found out that his real name is Feng Xinan. He was originally a disciple of Southern Flower Sect's Taoist grotto heaven, Huang Yugong. 60 years ago, his master died in a battle with Zhang Yan, and he couldn't bear the bullying from his sect, so he escaped from the sect. Since then, he has been chased by the disciples of Southern Flower Sect, and he had nowhere to hide. That's why he joined my sect." Sima Quan closed his eyes and pondered for a moment. "After you go down, tell him to come see me." Yu Xiao didn't ask for the reason, he just said yes. Sima Quan waved his sleeves. He said, "I'm fine, you can go." Yu Xiao said, "Then disciple will take his leave." He bowed again and respectfully retreated. After Feng Xin and entered the palace cauldron, he was given an alchemy room like many of his fellow sect members as a place for his daily cultivation. Just now he had settled down, a demon floated out of the incense burner in front of him and said to him, "Feng Hui, the palace master has summoned you. Go quickly. Don't make any mistakes." Feng Xin was startled, and at the same time, he felt slightly uneasy. He didn't know why Sima Quan was looking for him, but since he had come to the heavenly palace, thus, he said, "This disciple understands. I'll go now." The demon said, "After you go out, walk along the golden bridge. After 1,000 steps, you will reach the inner palace. Don't delay." With that he disappeared on the spot. Feng Xin took a few breaths and calmed his emotions. He pushed open the door and walked along the path pointed out. When he was about to reach the front of the inner palace, he heard 2 disciples on duty talking not far away. One of them said, "I've been in the palace for more than a year, and although my skills have improved greatly, I'm always on tenterhooks. I don't know how long these peaceful days can last." The other person sneered and said, "You don't have to worry about this. 2 years ago, 2 Dongtian Jinren from the Yuan Yang sect came here and wanted to destroy the Dark Yin Palace, but they were forced to retreat by the Patriarch alone. You see, no one from the Donghua sect dares to come and pick a fight. If they could, they would have come long ago. Why wait until today?" Feng Xin had been brought to the PG Palace by Huang Yugong before, so he was much more knowledgeable than his peers. He knew that the Dongtian Jinren of the Donghua continent did not dare to fight Sima Quan, but they were too protective of themselves and did not want to take the initiative. That was why the Dark Yin Palace was allowed to exist. However, he hoped that this situation could continue before he achieved Yuaning. At this time, the 2 people also sensed someone coming and shouted, "Who's here?" Feng Xinan walked forward and reported his name. The person on duty seemed to have been instructed to immediately open the palace doors and let him in. He stepped into the inner room, passed through 3 palace doors, and came to a hall. He saw a yellow-robed Taoist sitting on a cattail hassock, black smoke floating around him. He quickly bowed and said, "Disciple Feng Hui, I was summoned by the palace lord and have come to pay my respects." After all, he was from a major sect. His actions were formal, and his expression was neither servile nor overbearing. He was unlike many disciples from small sects who were either inexplicably fearful or overly humble. Sima Quan looked at him and nodded subconsciously. After asking a few questions, he changed the topic. He said, "You came to the heavenly palace because you have a request. Let me ask you, what is it that you want?" Feng Xin wanted to say that he had no other request and only came to join the heavenly palace because he admired its reputation. However, when the words were on the tip of his tongue, he could not say them and could only respond with silence. Sima Quan laughed and said, "You don't have to hide it. If the disciples had no request, why would they join me? And it's the same for me. If I want to use the disciples, I should fulfill their wishes. We both take what we need, so there's nothing to hide." Fang Xin hesitated for a moment and said, "Disciple only wants a stable place to cultivate." Sima Quan stared at him for a moment and said, "I thought you would ask the heavenly palace of mysterious Yin to help you take revenge for your master. Fortunately, you did not overestimate yourself. That Zhenrenzhang is not so easy to provoke." Fang Xin was shocked. Only then did he realize that the other party had already found out about his identity. He asked, "Could it be that even the palace lord is not that Zhenrenzhang's opponent?" Sima Quan said, "If you can cultivate to my level, you will understand. Otherwise, what's the use of telling you?" Fang Xin lowered his head and said, "Disciple did not have such thoughts." Sima Quan nodded and said, "That's good. If you only want to find a stable place to cultivate, I can grant you that wish." Fang Xin asked carefully, "Then what does the palace lord need this disciple for?" Sima Quan chuckled and said, "You don't have to be on guard. Let me ask you, among the disciples that entered my palace, other than a few who rebelled, when have I ever mistreated any of them?" When Fang Xin heard this, he nodded to himself. Ever since the heavenly palace of mysterious Yin was established, its reputation was not bad. Even those who regretted leaving would be allowed to leave as long as they made an oath not to divulge the matters of the palace. It was also because of this that they did so. They were not at all like the demons and the rumors, which attracted many Donghua cultivators to come and seek refuge. At this moment, Sima Quan threw out an item and said, "Take it." Fang Xin took a look and saw that it was an inconspicuous black pearl. He said, "This is," Sima Quan said, "You don't need to ask what this is. The next time you go to Donghua continent, there will be a demon to lead the way and bring you to a place. There will be someone there to receive you. You just need to hand this item to him. If everything goes well, I can exempt you from the test for half a year when you return." Fang Xin held the black pearl in his hand and cupped his fists, saying, "I will do my best." Sima Quan's shoulders shook. A few demons appeared behind him and with a grab, they were all kept into a talisman on the table. Then he said, "Take this talisman, it can help you protect yourself." Fang Xin went forward to take it and kept it carefully. He bade farewell and left the palace. After he returned to his own alchemy room, he only cultivated for 2 days. Then, a demon came to say that it was time to go to Donghua continent. He packed up his luggage and went to get a sky ship. He galloped out of the palace cauldron and headed to the surface. Donghua continent, southwest mountains, tens of thousands of feet underground. 2 men in white were standing above a fire cave, instructing thousands of demons to form a large cauldron. When Sima Quan returned that day, he smashed a palace cauldron. Although many of the broken pieces were worn away when they passed through the 9 layers of high clouds, there were still many pieces left, which were the essence of the cauldron. For more than 2 years, the 2 women and a group of demons collected it and rebuilt it with the help of the earth fire. Suddenly, there was a change in spiritual opportunity. The dozens of demons below shook and gathered in the sky. Not long after, Sima Quan's illusory figure appeared. The 2 women in white saw it and quickly knelt down. They said in unison, "Greetings, Master." Sima Quan looked around and saw that the cauldron had been built. He said, "You did well." He had the body of a sky demon. As long as he did not get rid of all his clones and had enough spiritual opportunity, he could regenerate them. Now that he had the black bead, even if his main body was destroyed, even if he was not in the demon's cave, he could still recover in a few decades. However, it was easy to be seen by people outside the sky. There would not be enough lives to kill. If he moved to the depths of the frozen Hua continent, it would not be easy to be discovered. With this cauldron, even if he failed in the future, he could still use it as a place to hide. The 2 female disciples said, "Building this cauldron was all thanks to Master's mana. We dare not take credit." Sima Quan said, "Very good. I have already sent someone to the Donghua continent to receive you. He is carrying an item that is very important to me. You must get it for me, and no accidents can happen. However, you must remember not to touch this item. You can only ask the maids to retrieve it. Otherwise, if you lose your life, don't blame me for not reminding you. The two female disciples lowered their heads and said, "We won't dare to delay Master's matter." After Sima Quan gave his instructions, his figure gradually dissipated and split into demons again. However, the number was less than half of the original number. The two female disciples discussed in a low voice. Then they leaped into the pill aura and headed to the surface. At the same time, above the Donghua floating heavenly palace, Zhang Yan slowly walked out from the upper extreme hall. The Taoist children on both sides saw him and bowed to greet him. He looked at the sky. A clear light flashed on his body. He had already turned into a rainbow and rushed out of the 9 heavens. After a long time, the 9 heavens cloud that he had knocked away let out a rumble. The people of the Donghua clan's Dongtian immediately noticed the commotion. They could not help but look into the sky. When they saw that the person who went was Zhang Yan, they could not help but have their own thoughts. Many of them could not help but secretly plan. Zhang Yan flew out of the sky in a flash. He stopped and looked up. At this moment, he saw a palace cauldron floating in the sky. The other cauldrons were nowhere to be seen. He knew that after the battle between Sima Quan and primordial Yang Wuzhenren, he deliberately sent Sima Quan far away to hide. He had long seen this move. If he really wanted to find it, it would not be difficult. However, at this moment, he did not need to care about this. He said in a clear voice, "Xianmen Zhang Yan is here. I invite the palace master of Xianin Heavenly Palace to come out and fight." His voice was transmitted with mana. It collided with the palace cauldron, causing the cauldron to rumble and tremble. Sima Quan was originally meditating. When he heard the voice, he immediately leaped out. However, when he looked at Zhang Yan, his expression was a little ugly. He hesitated for a while and actually turned to run without saying a word. Zhang Yan laughed and said, "How can I let you take it off?" Sima Quan did not go far. With a shake of his body, he suddenly turned into 2 people. However, they flew in different directions. He heard that after Zhang Yan became a heavenly abode, he had confronted several people from the Dongtian abode. Within 100 years, he had fought 3 times in a row. He had even killed 2 people from the Dongtian abode. Such a battle record could be said to be unique among those of the same generation. Even Yan Changsheng from back then could not be compared to him. He knew that his chances of winning in a head-on battle were extremely small. Thus, he decided to use a method of attrition and delay. After the other party's strength was exhausted, he would retreat. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. He reached out his hand and pointed. With a thunderous sound, 2 streaks of lightning flew out and chased in 2 different directions. The lightning chased for a few thousand miles. Suddenly, the doppelganger in front of him shook and actually split into 2. Not wanting to give chase, the lightning also shuddered and split into 2 identical streaks, chasing after their respective targets. This chase lasted for an entire day. With the speed of the 2 of them, they were already far away from the 9 continents. The distance between Sima Quan's doppelganger and the main body could not be too far. Otherwise, if they lost connection, he would lose a portion of his cultivation. Thus, he could only use the phase reversal technique to change from time to time. However, no matter how many doppelgangers he split into, the lightning would always change with them. It seemed like it could split into an infinite number of times. Seeing that he couldn't shake it off with this move, Sima Quan didn't believe that he couldn't deal with a mere bolt of lightning. He used another inherited technique, and all of his doppelgangers disappeared one by one, converging into a conjured body at the same time. With a shake of his hand, he summoned the black mirror light, intending to absorb this bolt of lightning. Only then would he be able to escape with peace of mind. Who would have thought that under this light, it actually wouldn't budge? The lightning turned at this moment and suddenly turned into a clear sword light. There was a faint killing intent on it. With a shake, the brilliance shot through the sky and shook the void. Sima Quan's expression changed greatly. he said in shock. True killing sword? How would he dare to resist? His body turned and became invisible, escaping into the depths of the void. Chapter 1077. In the Xueshua sect, on the ancient spring platform, when Qingxiang watched as the two beams of light disappeared into the void one after the other. His eyes flickered with uncertainty. After a while, he stood up abruptly and came to a blood jade wall. With a wave of his hand, a dozen pearls on both sides shone brightly and gathered on the stone wall. After a while, a handsome Taoist appeared and said, "Junior apprentice brother, what's the matter?" Wen Qingxiang bowed and said, "Senior apprentice brother, I would like to ask the sect to open the seal of the cave and suppress the 6-een demon bug." The Taoist frowned and said, "The demon bug is endless. As long as Sima Quan rushes back, it will evolve again. It doesn't matter how many there are. I know that Zhang Yan of Qinsong is fighting with him. Why not wait until the battle is over before we act?" Wen Qingxiang said, "If Zhang Yan of Qinsong School makes a move, Sima Quan will definitely die. This is the best time to eliminate the 6-een demon bug. If we do it later, there will be trouble in the future." The Taoist thought for a while and said, "That's right. Zhang Yan's fighting ability is far better than his peers, and he is good at escaping. It won't be easy for Sima Quan to escape from him. But what is the trouble that junior apprentice brother mentioned?" Wen Qingxiang said, "Sima Quan is an extraterrestrial demon, and it is difficult to kill him completely. Moreover, he is an elder of the Nether Spring sect. He will leave a way out for himself. If his extraterrestrial demon body is destroyed, he will let his disciples or clones control the demon bug. It won't be easy for us to act then. Sima Quan is being chased by Zhang Yan of Qinsong and has no time to worry about other things." The Taoist thought for a while and said, "Do you know how many precious materials were used to seal the demon bug?" Wen Qingxiang said, "Yes. If I make a mistake and want to seal the demon bug again, the ancient spring platform can make up for all the missing parts." The Taoist looked at him and said meaningfully, "That won't be necessary. Since I've allowed you to do this, I won't let you bear the responsibility alone. However, you shouldn't tell your fellow Taoists outside of the sect about this matter. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, it won't be easy to explain it to your fellow Taoists." Wen Qingxiang immediately bowed and said, "I understand." In the virtual sky, Sima Quan was desperately trying to escape. Once he activated the shapeless transformation, unless he encountered a demon-subduing treasure, even a true killing weapon would not be able to do anything to him. If it wasn't for the fact that this technique consumed too much of his mana, he would have used it the moment he saw Zhang Yanshi. Why would he wait until he was right in front of him? Although Zhang Yan was only chasing after him as a sword light and was far away from his real body, the sword had already fused with his soul and was where the sword was. Everything he saw could be reflected in his heart. Just now, Sima Quan had suddenly disappeared from his heart. Immediately, he knew that he had used a formless transformation. He was already prepared for the art of invisibility. With a command of his mind, the sword light suddenly flew up and spun in the air, releasing rays of dazzling brilliance in all directions. Sima Quan was not far away. When he was hit by the light, he felt his body tremble. However, he was forced out from the shapeless transformation. This technique was called Sword Heart True Image. It was a small magical power that Zhang Yan had deduced for 2 years. It was specially used to break through the illusions and shapeless transformations of demonic creatures. However, if the enemy's cultivation level was high and his magical power was deep, he might not be able to force him to show up immediately. Therefore, the final result depended on the cultivation level of both parties. In this comparison, he was superior. Sima Quan was forced to show up, and he felt even more fearful. He deeply felt that Zhang Yan's methods were extremely restrained. It was obvious that he had come prepared. He did not dare to turn back to fight with him, and his speed of escape was much faster than before. However, the sword light chasing after him refused to let him go and continued to chase after him. Thousands of miles away, Zhang Yan shook his hand and released the moon-crossing flying raft. Then he stood on it and followed from afar. Using this flying raft to travel through the void, he did not expend his mana. No matter where the sky demon went, he was not afraid. As long as there was a sword light chasing after him, he was not afraid of losing his opponent. He had once heard that the Shaoqing extreme sword lineage had a magical power called Heaven and Earth Close. It was said that when this technique was connected to the extreme, no matter where the cultivator split the sword light to, as long as he was still within this world, he would be able to travel there in an instant. It was extremely mysterious. If he knew this magical power and mastered it, he would be able to catch up in a short period of time. However, he cultivated the Tao of sword transformation, and this lineage's sword technique emphasized on the method of splitting and combining. Even if Shaoqing was willing to pass down the aforementioned magical power, he would not be able to use it. Therefore, he could only follow the prescribed order and chase along the way. In reality, this was not disadvantageous to him. If Sima Quan did not want to stop and did not have any void-traversing artifact, then as long as he continued, he would be able to exhaust Sima Quan to death even without fighting. The two of them chased like this, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Sima Quan looked back and saw that the sword light was still steadily following behind him. It was neither fast nor slow, and he suddenly felt powerless. He had already faintly guessed that Zhang Yan had some kind of treasure on him, and was not afraid of exhausting himself in the void. He thought to himself, if this continues, even if I don't fight him, I will be defeated by the outer sky poison fire and fierce wind. I need to think of a way. He thought for a while and said, I was waiting to use this item when I came back, but it seems like it won't work now. He reached out and patted the pendant hanging on his waist. After a short while, a green light flashed and actually covered his body, instantly isolating him from the outer sky poison fire and fierce wind. This was not an item, but a primal essence stone that he took out from the palace cauldron. 2 years ago, after fighting with Yuan Yangsek's Wu Zhenren, he thought that this item would be of great use, so he studied it in detail and found out that it could help people traverse the void. If he did not borrow the help of the 7 palace cauldrons when he came back, he would have long discovered the secret within. Because it could not be kept in his sleeves, he could only make it into an accessory and hang it on his body. It's a pity that Zhang Yan came here without any warning. I only brought one out, but I don't know how long it will last. Zhang Yan saw his strange movements and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He thought to himself, since this person has a treasure that can allow him to traverse the void, then I need to change my original plan. He activated his divine will, and the sword light that was chasing behind Sima Quan suddenly flashed, and in the blink of an eye, it caught up to him and slashed down. Sima Quan couldn't help but feel shocked. If it was a normal treasure, then it would be fine. But how could he dare to let this kind of killing weapon hit him? He suddenly twisted his body and let it pass. The sword light missed and turned around in the air and caught up to him again. He could only dodge again, but this entanglement caused his body to inevitably be delayed. Sima Quan thought to himself, not good if I'm blocked here. When Zhang Yan catches up, then all my previous escape would have been a waste of energy. Thinking to this point, a hint of ruthlessness appeared in his eyes. His body shook, and several demons appeared in front of him, blocking. He flicked his sleeve and used his fastest speed to pull away from the sword light. Just now, although he was forced out of the formless transformation by the sword light, he also saw that the range of the light was only a few miles. So as long as he could escape this range in time, and then turn invisible, the opponent would not be able to force him to show himself, and the possibility of finding him would be very small. But the sword light wasn't blocked as he had hoped, and instead, it shook slightly. Several sword lights split off to meet the demons, but the most dazzling sword light was still rushing towards him. It wasn't willing to let him pass so easily. Sima Quan took a look, and his eyes couldn't help but narrow. He suddenly realized that perhaps because Zhang Yan's real body wasn't here, and he was only controlling it with his divine will, when the sword light split off, there would be a momentary pause. Although this short period of time wasn't eye-catching, if he could make good use of it, he could increase the distance between them. He thought for a while, and finally came to a conclusion. Just now, he had to do it at least 6 times, and each time, he had to maintain his own speed to match or exceed the sword light. Only then would he be able to achieve this plan. But he didn't dare to think about it immediately. It wasn't that he was worried that he couldn't do it, but he was afraid that Zhang Yan would see through it and use some method to stop him. After thinking for a while, he had an idea. He suddenly shouted, and his body sped up a lot. At the same time, he left behind dozens of demons behind, wanting to trick the sword light into stopping. But out of expectation, the sword light didn't use the separation and reunion technique this time. Instead, it shot forward, leaving more than half of the demons behind, and the few that blocked its way were directly crushed by the sword chi. Seeing that the situation didn't develop as he had imagined, Sima Quan's expression couldn't help but stiffen. Since he had already thought of a plan, he couldn't bear to give up just like that. He gritted his teeth, and once again split off a few doppelgangers. They weren't as easy to kill as the demons, and they were as fast as him. If the flying sword ignored them, then he could command the doppelgangers to escape far away, and then use the legacy technique to turn around and easily escape from the battlefield. But if the doppelgangers were killed while blocking, he would definitely lose a portion of his FA. But in order to successfully escape, he had to pay this price. Sure enough, it was as he had expected. The sword light trembled, and spat out several sharp rays to deal with the doppelgangers that were charging at him. Sima Quan's spirit rose, and he took advantage of this moment to activate his FA. He suddenly flew more than half a mile away, and then shook out several doppelgangers. In a short period of time, he did this 5 times in a row, and thought that he had successfully left the sword light a sufficient distance away. He snorted, and once again turned into the shapeless transformation. Zhang Yan saw everything clearly through the mental reflection, and he couldn't help but smile. Just now, when he used the Sword of Truth, because Sima Quan wasn't far away, he didn't use too much FA. This wasn't because he didn't have enough power, but because he had already reached the realm of mastery in using FA. If it was necessary, he wouldn't waste any more. Now that he saw it disappear again, he immediately activated his divine will. The sword light suddenly emitted a clear light, and in an instant, it washed through the world within 100 miles. Sima Quan originally thought that he had successfully escaped, but who knew that his body suddenly trembled, as if he had been hit by something. He was once again forced out by the Sword of Truth, and for a moment he was in a sorry state. He looked around, and saw that the clear light had spread out in all directions, and the area it covered was far beyond what he had expected. His expression turned ugly, and he didn't know that he had calculated wrongly. He secretly gritted his teeth and said, "This Zhang Yan's FA is really too high, and no one knows what he has up his sleeves. If I continue to run like this, I'm afraid I won't be able to escape. If my FA is used up, then I'll be at his mercy. Why don't I take advantage of the fact that I still have FA and fight him head-on, and see if I can force him to retreat? Even if I really lose, I've already prepared an escape route. At worst, I'll just make a comeback in the future." If he could escape, of course he wouldn't stay, but now that there was no possibility of that, he could only choose to turn back and fight with his life on the line. He stood still, opened his mouth, and spat out a ball of thick black fog. Not only did it envelop his entire body, but it also enveloped the surrounding 100 miles. At the same time, his body shook, and more than 10 doppelgangers appeared within it. Although this chi couldn't escape the pursuit of the sword light, it contained an evil and filthy chi that could erode the spirituality of the sword. If the sword light chased after him like before, he could use the phase reversal technique to come and go. He was confident, but in a situation where he wouldn't harm a single doppelganger, the sword light would be tainted in the future. However, when the sword light saw that he had stopped, it didn't chase after him anymore. Instead, it hung in the void and stared at him, not too close, but not too far away. Sima Quan couldn't help but feel depressed. He could predict that if he took the initiative to attack now, the sword light would definitely retreat. However, he didn't plan to escape, and there was no need for him to get entangled with the sword light. He just blindly urged on the black fog. When the fog expanded to 1,000 miles in size, he saw a flying raft that was 100 feet in size coming over from afar. A handsome Taoist stood with his hands behind his back at the top of the pagoda. His gaze was deep and unfathomable as he looked over. Sima Quan's heart jumped. He didn't think that Zhang Yan would have such a flying treasure. If he continued to escape just now, when his Fa was exhausted, he would definitely die. He retreated a few steps and stared straight ahead, ready to deal with his opponent's attack at any time. When Zhang Yan got closer, he took a look at the big ball of black fog. With a thought, a vast amount of profound qi spread out from behind him, continuously invading the void. Very quickly, it spread out for thousands of miles. Then the profound qi sea churned, and countless small five-elements devil-slaying divine thunder leaped into the sky, and like hail, they covered the sky and earth as they struck forward. Sima Quan's expression suddenly changed, and his eyes couldn't help but show fear. After fighting with martial sage Wu, he thought that he had seen the methods of the celestial paradise master. However, at this moment, when he saw the earth-shattering power of Zhang Yan's attack, he felt that the Fa of the two of them couldn't be compared at the same place. Unless he could be like Dozhan last time, and get in front of him and attack his sea of consciousness, there was no way he could win. Otherwise, he couldn't think of a way to defeat this kind of person. His thoughts turned quickly, and his body retreated. In a split second, he retreated from the fog. Then, with a face full of regret, he took out a demon jade scroll. He made a hand sign, and his body shook. Suddenly, it turned into thousands of demon bodies, and flew in all directions. At the same time, the jade scroll also made a cracking sound, and broke into two. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.